What if Luffy came back, but instead of wanting meat, freedom, or the One Piece, he just wanted to bully the celestial dragons for entertainment? In this story, Luffy gets fused with Lobo, meaning Gear 5 is no longer joyful cartoon freedom, it's cartoon violence with zero customer service. The world government has rules, Imu has secrets, the Gorosei have ancient powers, and Luffy Lobo has one question. Does this break if I punch it? So grab your meat, hide your bubble helmet, and let's begin. And if you enjoy chaotic what-if stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video.
Chapter 1. The Worst Reincarnation in History. Birth of the Rubber Menace. Nobody knew where souls went when they were done wearing bodies. Priests gave answers. Scholars invented diagrams. Pirates laughed and drank until the questions stopped bothering them. Marines wrote official reports insisting the matter was outside their jurisdiction. Celestial dragons, naturally, assumed souls lined up politely to applaud them. They were all wrong. Between lives, between worlds, between one bad idea and the next, there was a place without sea, sky, wind, meat, treasure, flags, dreams, or anyone shouting about justice. It was not heaven. It was not hell. It was more like the backstage area of existence, where reality tossed unfinished things into storage and hoped nothing caught fire. Something caught fire. It was small at first, a bright ember tumbling through the dark, spinning lazily, warm and impossible to ignore. It laughed as it drifted. Not because there was anything funny, but because laughing was what it did when it was scared, excited, hungry, bored, or about to punch a god in the mouth. That ember was Monkey D. Luffy, or what was left of him between one breath and the next. He did not understand death. He never really had. Death was a thing that happened to enemies, legends, brothers, and old men with smiles too big for their faces. It was a wall in front of other people. Luffy had always treated walls as suggestions. If he could not climb one, he stretched over it. If he could not stretch over it, he punched through it. If punching failed, he got hungrier and punched harder, so when his soul floated through the dark, he did what Luffy always did, he grinned. Next adventure, huh? No one answered. The void probably regretted that. Because something else was coming. It did not drift. It crashed, a streak of black humor, bad decisions, cosmic violence, and pure stubborn refusal to stay dead tore across the afterlife like a comet made of motor oil and teeth. It had been banned from several heavens, escaped several hells, insulted at least 3 gods on the way out, and considered reincarnation less a spiritual process and more a loophole with funny lighting. Lobo did not enter the void. Lobo invaded it. The impact should have shattered both souls. 2 mythologies colliding. 2 impossible wills meeting in the dark. One was freedom given human shape. The other was appetite wearing boots. One wanted adventure. The other wanted entertainment, preferably loud. For one brief instant, the ember and the comet touched. Luffy's soul flared gold. Lobo's soul grinned back with too many edges. There was no conversation, no agreement, no noble fusion of heroic spirits, no touching moment where 2 legends understood each other and became something greater. Lobo hit Luffy's soul like a bar fight hitting a birthday party. The warmth did not vanish. That would have been cleaner. Instead, it got buried. Luffy's memories scattered like wanted posters in a storm. A straw hat under sunlight, Shanks laughing, Ace's hand on his head, Sabo's pipe, meat on a plate, Zoro sleeping with one eye open, Nami shouting about money. Usopp lying with his whole chest, Sanji kicking someone through a table, Chopper crying because he was happy, Robin smiling like she had forgotten how much the world hurt, Frankie posing, Brooke asking the wrong question at the wrong time, Jin standing calm as the sea itself. The memories survived. The feelings did not. They became pictures without warmth, songs without music, maps of places someone else had loved. Lobo looked around inside the soul he had just taken over and gave a low, pleased chuckle. Well, he said to no one, this is a weird little body. Then the void folded. The sea came back. The 1,000 sunnies sailed under a sky so blue it looked hand-painted by someone who still believed in happy endings. The ship was alive with noise. Good noise. The kind that belonged to the Straw Hat Pirates when nobody was actively trying to kill them, arrest them, eat them, drown them, or explain taxes. Usopp stood on a barrel near the mast, arms wide, voice booming with the confidence of a man who had personally defeated 6 sea kings, 3 admirals, a mountain-sized crab, and possibly the moon, depending on which version of the story he was telling. So there I was, Usopp declared. Alone. Outnumbered, surrounded by 10,000 enemy snipers. Last time it was 5,000, Nami said from her chair, not looking up from her map. That was before I remembered the other 5,000, Chopper gasped. There were more, of course there were more. Usopp said, pointing dramatically at the horizon. A true warrior of the sea always remembers more enemies when the story needs them. Brook laughed so hard his teacup rattled against his ribs. Yo ho ho ho, a terrifying battlefield indeed. Sanji emerged from the galley with plates balanced along both arms, a cigarette hanging from his mouth and irritation already warming up in his eyebrows. Oi, don't get crumbs on the deck. And where is Luffy? If he tries to steal the meat before everyone gets some, I'm kicking him into next week. He was sleeping near the figurehead, Robin said. Her voice was soft. Calm. The kind of calm that had seen ruins, wars, monsters, and governments fall apart, and had learned to listen carefully when peace lasted too long. Zoro was asleep against the mast, or pretending to be. With Zoro, the difference was philosophical. Frankie was somewhere below deck making a noise that suggested either repairs or a war crime against carpentry. Jinbe stood near the rail, watching the sea with the quiet weight of someone who knew calm water did not mean safe water. Everything was normal. Warm, loud, alive. Then Luffy opened his eyes. No one noticed at first. That was the mercy. He lay on the Sunny's lion figurehead, one arm hanging over the side, straw hat tilted across his chest. His body looked the same, lean muscle, sandals, red vest, scar under the eye. The impossible ease of someone who belonged wherever he happened to be, but his eyes were wrong. Luffy's eyes had always been simple. Not stupid, never that, but direct. They looked at the world like a locked door was only interesting because opening it might reveal food, friends, enemies, or a big beetle. These eyes looked at the world like the door, the lock, the room beyond it, and everyone inside were all part of a joke that had gone on too long. He sat up slowly. The motion was small, but Robin saw it. So did Jinbe. Zoro's eye opened. Luffy looked at his hands first. He flexed his fingers, stretched them, watched the rubber pull longer than it should, then snap back into place. The word was quiet. It had no wonder in it. Sanji turned, plate in hand. Oi, sleeping beauty, food's ready. Luffy looked at him for a heartbeat. Nothing happened. Then his mouth spread into a grin. It was almost right. Almost, that was the problem. Food, he said, as if testing whether the word belonged to him. Chopper's ears twitched. Luffy? He dropped from the figurehead to the deck and landed without his usual bounce. No wild laugh, no immediate sprint toward the table. No hand stretching across the deck to steal meat before Sanji could shout. He just walked. The crew watched without meaning to. Luffy picked up a roasted sea king rib, took one bite, chewed, and stared at the horizon. Sanji's eyebrow twitched. That's it, Luffy swallowed. Not bad. The deck went quiet. A cloud passed over the sun. Usopp lowered his arms. Not bad. Nami slowly put down her pen. Luffy, are you sick? Chopper was already moving, medical bag bouncing against his side. Open your mouth, say no, wait, first tell me if you hit your head. Did you eat anything strange? Did you get poisoned? Did you? Luffy's hand shot out, not fast in the way Luffy was usually fast, not playful, not rubber chaos. Precise. 2 fingers caught Chopper gently by the forehead and stopped him in place. Chopper froze. Luffy leaned down, studying him. The reindeer doctor stared up into his captain's face and felt something cold climb his spine. You talk, Luffy said. Chopper blinked. I always talk, right? Luffy's grin widened by a fraction. Forgot that part. Nami stood. Forgot. Robin's eyes narrowed. Zoro was fully awake now. The Sunny creaked beneath them. A friendly sound, usually. A familiar sound. Wood and wind and memory. The ship had carried them through storms, battles, impossible seas, and laughter that could shake the sky. Luffy looked down at the deck. His foot tapped once. Nice boat, he said. Frankie's head popped up from below deck like a cannonball wearing sunglasses. Boat, Sanji's voice dropped. Ship. Luffy looked at Frankie. You build this. Frankie's chest swelled automatically. You bet I did. The 1000 Sunny is a super masterpiece. Adam Wood, custom cola engine, soldier dock system, reinforced, neat, Luffy said. Frankie stopped. That one word landed harder than a cannon, neat. The Sunny was not neat. The Sunny was home. Zoro stood slowly. Luffy. There was warning in the way he said it. Luffy turned to him, and for just a moment something passed behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe, not affection, not warmth. More like finding an old blade in a drawer and remembering it had once fit your hand. Zoro, he said. The swordsman's hand hovered near his swords. What happened to you? Luffy scratched his cheek. Long story, we've got time. Luffy looked at the horizon again. I don't. That was when the lookout bell rang. Usopp, grateful for any interruption, scrambled up the rigging with practiced speed. He lifted his goggles, squinted into the distance, and immediately regretted being the person with the best eyesight. Marine ship, port side, coming in fast. Sanji exhaled smoke sharply. Great, exactly what we needed. Nami grabbed her climb attacked. How many? One ship, Usopp said. Medium size, looks like patrol class. Frankie cracked his knuckles. Then we blast past them and keep sailing. That would be the normal plan, Jim said. Nobody asked why he used the word normal. The marine ship cut through the water toward them, white sails snapping, cannon ports open. A loudspeaker snail crackled to life. Straw Hat Pirates, by order of the world government, lower your sails and prepare to be boarded. Luffy walked to the rail. The crew moved with him out of instinct. That was what they did. Their captain stepped forward and they followed. Even now, even with the wrongness sitting in his skin like a shadow, the marine captain on the enemy deck raised a sword. You are surrounded by justice. Luffy stared at him. Then looked left, then right, then back at the marine ship, surrounded, he said. Usopp swallowed. Technically they're only on one side, Luffy nodded. Thought so. The marine captain continued shouting, something about charges, something about piracy. Something about the glory of absolute justice and how the Straw Hats had finally run out of luck. Luffy tilted his head. Huh, he said. I forgot these things existed. Nami's stomach tightened. Luffy, don't, he glanced back. Don't what? Whatever you're thinking. His grin returned. I'm not thinking much. That was worse. His arm stretched toward the marine ship, but it did not fly wild and goofy like before. No shouted attack name, no laughter, no huge dramatic wind-up. His fist crossed the distance like a judgment that had gotten bored halfway through and decided to arrive early. The impact did not linger on details. For YouTube, history would later describe it as the moment the marine vessel ceased to be operational. That was polite. The ship folded inward with a sound like a giant stepping on a wooden toy. The mast snapped. The cannon line vanished into splinters. The sea jumped. The shockwave rolled across the Sunny, tossing Usopp backward into Frankie's arms and sending Sanji's cigarette spinning into the air. Then the marine ship was wreckage. No grand battle, no banter, no second chance, just silence and floating debris. Chopper made a small sound. Sanji's face had gone pale with anger. What did you do? Luffy watched the wreckage bob on the waves, solved it. They were Marines. Nami said, voice shaking. Not all of them were monsters. Luffy looked genuinely confused, not offended, not defensive, confused as if someone had criticized him for swatting a mosquito after it announced legal authority. They shot first. They didn't even fire. They were going to. Zoro stepped forward. That's not how you do things. Luffy turned. The air between them tightened. Zoro's hand closed around a sword hilt. For years, Zoro had followed Luffy because Luffy's dream was ridiculous enough to deserve loyalty. Because Luffy never lied about who he was. Because even when he was reckless, even when he was stupid, even when he knocked down kings and gods and warlords, he did it with a heart so clear it made the world around him look dirty. This man wore Luffy's face. That was the insult. Luffy looked at Zoro's swords, then at Zoro. And smiled with something almost like fondness. You'd be fun, he said. Zoro drew 1 inch of steel. Robin spoke before the blade came free. Not here. Everyone looked at her. Robin's expression was unreadable, but her hands were clenched behind her back. Not now, she said. Zoro's jaw tightened. Luffy's grin faded, not from fear, but from disappointment. Then he turned away. Fine. The word should have ended the moment. It did not, because the Sunny was drifting closer to the wreckage, and beyond it, another ship appeared on the horizon, not marine, pirate. A shabby, ugly vessel with patched sails and a figurehead that looked like a drunk goat. Its crew had clearly intended to rob whoever survived the marine encounter. Upon seeing the ruined patrol ship and the straw hats nearby, they began turning around with impressive spiritual clarity. Luffy saw them. His eyes brightened, not with joy, interest. "Now that," he said, "is a funny-looking ship." Frankie's mouth opened. "No." Luffy stretched one arm, grabbed the ugly ship's mast, and yanked. The pirate ship lurched across the sea like reality had been hooked by a lunatic fisherman. Its crew screamed. The ship slammed alongside the Sunny with a crash that made both vessels groan. The opposing pirates stared across at the straw hats, then at Luffy, then at the destroyed marine wreckage. Their captain raised one finger. "We surrender." Luffy hopped aboard their ship. "Good choice." The straw hats followed him with their eyes, horrified and bewildered. Frankie jumped forward. "Luffy, get back here." Luffy looked around the ugly pirate ship. He kicked a barrel, opened a crate, found a bottle of something questionable, sniffed it, and tossed it over his shoulder. "This one's got character," he said. Nami's voice went flat with disbelief. "Character? It smells like rotten rope and bad decisions." "Exactly." Frankie's sunglasses slipped down his nose. "You can't be serious." Luffy pointed at the Sunny. "You keep that one." The deck froze. The words seemed too stupid to understand at first. Keep that one, as if the 1000th Sunny was a spare coat, as if home could be handed off because another ship looked funnier. Frankie's face changed. It did not twist with rage, it fell. That was worse. "The Sunny," he said carefully, "is your ship." Luffy looked at the lion figurehead. The Sunny smiled back at him in carved wood and memory. For a second, his grin faltered. It was tiny, almost invisible, but Nami saw it. Chopper saw it. Robin definitely saw it. Something inside Luffy's face shifted, like an old door opening a crack. He remembered Mary burning. He remembered crying. He remembered the Sunny launching into the sky. He remembered shouting with joy. He remembered home. Then Lobo's boredom rolled over the memory like smoke over a candle. Luffy said. Frankie did not move. Sanji did. He crossed the deck in 3 strides, foot already lifting, fire sparking at his heel. "You don't get to say that." Luffy did not dodge. Sanji's kick slammed into his side with enough force to crack stone. Luffy bent around the impact, rubber body folding unnaturally, then snapped back. He looked down at Sanji's foot, then up at Sanji. "Nice kick." Sanji's eyes burned. "Who are you?" Luffy leaned closer. The grin returned, low and ugly and amused. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." For one terrible moment, Sanji looked like he might keep fighting. Then Jinbe placed a hand on his shoulder. "Not yet," the helmsman said quietly. Sanji trembled with restraint. Across the deck, the captured pirates stood in a neat line, trying very hard to become furniture. Luffy pointed at them. "You, off." The pirate captain blinked. "Off, off, into the sea." Luffy shrugged. "Into your future, be creative." They jumped, every single one of them. Usopp watched them splash down and paddle frantically toward debris. "Okay, that was actually kind of impressive discipline." Nami rounded on him, not helping. Luffy grabbed the ugly ship's wheel. "So, where's something important?" Nobody answered. He looked at Nami. She hated that he still knew to look at her. "You're the map girl." "Navigator," she said. "Right, where's something important?" Nami's grip tightened around her, climaxed. "Why?" "Because important things make the funniest noises when they break." The wind moved between them. There are moments on the sea when even waves seem to hesitate. This was one of them. Robin stepped forward. Mary Geo eyes. Everyone turned to her. Nami stared. Robin did not look away from Luffy. "If you want something important, that is the center of the world." Usopp made a strangled noise. "Why would you tell him that?" "Because he already knows," Robin said softly. "He just does not care enough to remember." Luffy's grin widened. "Mary Geo eyes," he repeated, tasting the name. "That where the bubble-head gods live." Sanji's voice was sharp. "Celestial dragons." Same joke. Jinbe's expression darkened. "That path leads to war." Luffy laughed. There it was, the laugh. For one heartbreaking second, it sounded almost like him. Too loud, too open, too big for his body. Then it dipped lower, sharper, hungrier. "Good," he said. The new ship turned. The 1000th Sunny remained where it was, rocking gently in the wake. For the first time since she had been built, the Sunny watched the straw hat leave without her. Nobody knew what to do. That was the real wound. If an enemy had stolen Luffy, they would have fought. If a curse had twisted him, they would have broken it. If he had died, they would have mourned. But he was standing right there, wearing the hat, breathing the same air, knowing their names, remembering everything. And not caring enough for those memories to save him, Zoro stepped onto the ugly ship first. Sanji followed, furious. Nami came next because someone had to stop them all from sailing into a whirlpool out of emotional damage. Usopp came because leaving was somehow scarier than staying. Chopper came crying quietly. Frankie came last, after placing one hand on the Sunny's rail and whispering something no one else heard. Robin stood for a moment between ships, then she joined them. Jinbe took the helm only after Luffy immediately proved he could steer, but had no interest in steering well. Behind them, the Thousand Sunny drifted, not abandoned forever, not yet, but left behind. The sea remembered. The day stretched into evening. The ugly ship, now unofficially and unwillingly part of history, sailed toward the red line. The crew moved like ghosts. No one sang. No one argued about food. No one asked Brook to play. Even Luffy, or whatever sat inside Luffy, now seemed content to lean against the rail and watch the sea pass. Nami found him near sunset with a stack of papers taken from the wrecked marine ship. Wanted posters, reports, bounty lists, names of pirates, revolutionaries, criminals, threats, kings, traitors, and anyone else the world government had decided was inconvenient enough to price. Luffy flipped through them lazily. Lots of numbers, he said. Nami stood a few feet away. You used to like bounties. I used to like a lot of things. She flinched despite herself. He glanced at her, that flicker again, not guilt recognition. You're mad. Nami laughed once, bitterly. That's what you're calling this. What should I call it? She stepped closer. You left the Sunny. Yeah, you hurt Frankie, probably. You scared Chopper. He scares easy. Her hand cracked across his face before she thought. The slap rang out across the deck. Everyone heard it. Sanji turned. Zoro looked up. Chopper covered his mouth. Luffy's head stayed tilted from the impact. For a long moment, he did nothing. Then he slowly turned back to her. The red mark on his cheek faded almost instantly. Nami stood her ground, though her hand shook. If there is anything left of him in there. She said, voice low, then listen carefully. You don't get to treat us like strangers. Luffy looked at her. The sunset painted his face gold. For half a second he looked young, almost lost. Then he smiled, not cruelly, worse, honestly. I remember stealing your hat back from Arlong. Nami stopped breathing. I remember you crying. I remember being mad. I remember punching that shark guy through a building. He looked back at the bounty papers. But it feels like reading somebody else's favorite book. Her eyes shone. You're lying. I wish I was funny enough to make that up. Nami stepped back like he had physically pushed her. Robin appeared beside her, silent as a shadow. Luffy lifted one of the bounty lists and squinted at it. Pirates wanting to be king, he said. Marines wanting justice. Nobles wanting God. He snapped his fingers. A spark appeared. No one knew where he got the flint. Maybe he had stolen it. Maybe reality had provided it, because reality was beginning to understand that arguing would only make things worse. The corner of the bounty list caught fire. Luffy held it up and watched the flames crawl across the names. The whole world's running on bad jokes, he said. The paper burned brighter, his grin stretched wide, and this time it reached his eyes. Chopper backed away. Luffy dropped the burning list into a metal bucket and watched it collapse into ash. Guess I'll be the punchline. Above them, the first stars appeared. Ahead, beyond the curve of the world, the red line waited like a wall built by arrogant hands. And on a stolen ship that smelled like rotten rope and bad decisions, the Straw Hat Pirates sailed after their captain into the worst adventure of their lives. Chapter 2. 48 hours on the Red Line. The Ascent Holy Guard Massacre. The Red Line did not look like a wall from a distance. It looked like the world had been split open, then stacked wrong. A continent of stone rose straight out of the sea, so high the clouds seemed to gather around it not because of weather, but because even the sky needed somewhere to rest. The ocean crashed against its base with endless, furious repetition, waves breaking themselves against red rock that had watched kingdoms rise, rot, and vanish. At the top sat Mary Geoise, the Holy Land, the shining capital of divine arrogance, home of the celestial dragons. The place where the world's rulers lived above the world so they never had to smell it. From below, it looked untouchable. Luffy stood at the front of the stolen ship and stared up at it. The wind pulled at his vest. His straw hat sat low over his eyes. Behind him, the straw hats watched in silence as the impossible wall filled the horizon. Usopp swallowed. "So," he said, voice cracking slightly, "just to confirm, the plan is not to go there, right?" Luffy did not answer. That silence feels like a bad sign. Nami gripped the rail. "We should turn around." Sanji stood beside her, cigarette burning between his fingers. He had smoked 3 already and looked like he wanted to chew the 4th. "For once, I agree." Frankie's arms were folded tightly across his chest. His usual loud confidence had been locked behind something heavy. He had not said much since they left the Sunny behind. Every time the stolen ship creaked, his jaw tightened as though the sound personally offended him. Jinbe studied the red line carefully. Mary Geoise is not only guarded by soldiers, it is protected by geography, politics, and fear. Even reaching the upper level is considered impossible without official access. Luffy tilted his head. Sounds annoying. Zoro leaned against the mast, arms crossed. "You always hated annoying." Luffy glanced back at him. "Did I?" Zoro's eye narrowed. The question was not mockery. That made it worse. Robin stood near the back of the deck, her expression calm in the way winter is calm before it kills crops. She was looking at Mary Geoise too, but not like the others. Not with fear, not with tactical calculation, with memory. For Robin, the world government was not an institution. It was a hand around the throat of history. She had spent her life running from that hand. Now a monster wearing her captain's face was walking straight toward its wrist with a grin and no plan. That did not feel like justice. It did not feel like freedom. It felt like someone had set fire to a prison while the prisoners were still inside and called it weather. Chopper climbed onto a crate to see over the rail. "Luffy, maybe we can talk first." Luffy's smile appeared slowly. "Talk to who?" "The guards." Chopper said weakly. "Or someone." "About what?" Chopper opened his mouth, closed it. That was the terrible thing. There should have been an answer. Luffy always made impossible things simple. He would say he was going to save someone, punch someone, eat something, or become Pirate King. His reasons were absurd, but they were alive. This Luffy asked why, and the question landed like a stone in water with no bottom. Nami stepped forward. "About not starting a war with the entire world." Luffy looked at the red line again. "Pretty sure they started it a long time ago." Robin's fingers tightened around her arm. Nami flinched, because the worst part was that he was not wrong. The ship came closer to the base of the red line. The stolen vessel looked even worse now. Its patched sails strained. Its goat figurehead had lost one eye somewhere during the journey. The crew had started calling it the regrettable goat, mostly because Usopp had said it once under his breath, and nobody had the emotional energy to come up with something better. Luffy seemed fond of it. That alone was offensive. The sea grew rough near the stone wall. Currents twisted like animals. Waves slammed against the hull hard enough to make the deck tilt. Jinbe took the wheel with practiced strength, guiding them through churning water toward a narrow stretch of jagged rock. "There," he said. "If one were reckless enough to attempt a climb, that would be the closest point." Everyone looked at him. Jinbe sighed. "I did not say it was wise." Luffy stepped onto the rail. Nami's eyes widened. "No." Luffy stretched his arms. Sanji moved. Luffy, too late. He launched himself, not upward, in one clean leap forward, straight at the red line. He hit the cliff face with both hands and both feet, fingers punching into stone as if the continent were soft clay. Cracks spiderwebbed around each handhold. Pebbles rained down into the sea for a moment. He hung there, tiny against the impossible height. Then he started climbing fast. Not like a man scaling a wall, like a disease spreading upward. His hands slammed into rock. His feet kicked footholds into the stone. Each movement was casual, almost lazy, yet he rose faster than should have been physically possible. Gear second heat began to steam faintly from his body, mixing with sea spray as he accelerated. Usopp slowly raised one finger. "Okay," he said. So the plan was climbing the continent. Zoro walked to the rail. Sanji cursed. Nami pressed both hands to her face. "He is actually climbing the red line." Robin's voice was quiet. "Yes." Frankie looked physically pained. "We are not doing this with the goat." Jinbe's expression became extremely tired. "No, we are not." Above them, alarms began to ring. At the top of the red line, Mary Geoise had noticed. The Holy Guard had spent centuries training for threats that were never supposed to happen. Their job was not merely defense. Their job was theater. They stood in polished armor beneath white towers and golden banners, their presence a promise to the celestial dragons. Nothing below can reach you. Their drills were precise. Their weapons were ceremonial and deadly. Their commanders spoke often of pirates, revolutionaries, fishmen, giants, and other low-born threats who might one day attempt to stain the Holy Land. But no training manual had a section titled, "If a rubber man begins climbing the continent while whistling badly." The first soldier to see him was 19 years old. His name did not matter to history, which was unfair because he mattered very much to himself. He had joined the Holy Guard because his family believed service near the gods was an honor. He had polished his armor until it reflected clouds. He had memorized every oath, every formation, every rule about where to stand when a celestial dragon walked past, so his shadow would not accidentally touch their boot. That morning, he had expected boredom. Then the cliff alarm rang. He ran with his unit to the outer edge and looked down. At first, he thought someone had fired a grappling hook. Then he saw the figure, a man climbing, no ropes, no tools, no fear, just hands, feet, steam, and a straw hat. The young guard stared. "That's impossible," someone said. The commander beside him lifted a den mushy. Unauthorized ascent on the south cliff. All units to defensive positions. Repeat, unauthorized ascent. Cannons rolled into place along the cliff edge, riflemen knelt. The young guard raised his weapon and tried to stop his hands from shaking. The commander shouted, "Fire!" The cliff face exploded. Cannons roared, bullets rained downward, smoke filled the air, stones shattered around the climbing figure. Chunks of red rock tumbled into the sea far below. For half a second the young guard felt relief. Then the smoke cleared. The man was still climbing. A cannonball hit him square in the chest. It sank into him. The young guard saw it happen. Saw the black iron disappear into flesh and rubber and impossibility. The man paused. He looked down at his own chest. Then he reached in and pulled the cannonball out, not with pain, with curiosity. He turned it over in one hand as bullets struck his shoulders, head, arms, and back, each impact vanishing almost as quickly as it appeared. The climber looked up. His voice carried strangely well. "Do you boys do this all day?" he called. "Doesn't it get boring?" The young guard forgot how to breathe. The commander shouted for another volley. The cannons fired again. The climber grinned and kept coming. Below, on the regrettable goat, the straw hats watched the bombardment light up the cliff. Chopper clutched the rail. "They're shooting him." Sanji's face twisted. "That idiot. He's not dodging," Usopp whispered. Zoro's voice was low. "He doesn't need to." That was the problem. Luffy had always taken hits. He had always trusted his body in ways that made doctors, navigators, cooks, snipers, archaeologists, shipwrights, musicians, and swordsmen consider early retirement. But he had never treated pain as irrelevant. Pain had mattered to Luffy because everything mattered to Luffy. This man did not endure pain. He ignored its right to exist. Robin watched the cliff in silence. "What happens if he reaches the top?" Chopper asked. Nobody answered. Nami looked at the red line, then at the sea, then at the stolen ship. "We need another way up." Usopp stared at her. "We need another way away." Sanji flicked ash into the wind. "We're not leaving him." "Is that still him?" Usopp asked. The question hit the deck harder than cannon fire. Sanji turned on him, anger flaring. "Don't say that." Usopp's fear sharpened into something raw. "Why not? We're all thinking it." Chopper's eyes filled with tears. "Usopp, no, I'm serious," Usopp said, voice rising. "Luffy would not leave the Sunny. Luffy would not crush a marine ship like stepping on a bug. Luffy would not look at us like he's trying to remember why we're important." Zoro's hand rested on his sword. "He remembers." Usopp laughed once, shaky and bitter. "Great, that makes it better." Nami closed her eyes. Robin spoke quietly. "There is an elevator route used by authorized convoys. If the world government has shifted forces to stop him, the lower access may be less guarded." Everyone looked at her again. Frankie's jaw worked. "You're really helping him do this." Robin looked toward the top of the red line, where smoke curled against the clouds. "I am helping us reach him before he is alone in Mary Geoise." That ended the argument, not because everyone agreed. Because no one had a better excuse to keep following. At the top of the red line, the young guard's world had become thunder. The climber was close now, too close. Cannons had failed. Rifles had failed. Explosives had failed. Boiling oil had been suggested by a panicked officer, then abandoned because no one had boiling oil prepared, and several soldiers realized this was not a siege from a children's story. The commander drew his sword. Hold formation. The Holy Guard formed ranks along the cliff edge, spears forward. Shields locked. Hacky users stepped to the front, their weapons darkening with disciplined force. The young guard stood in the second line and prayed his knees would not betray him. A hand appeared over the edge, fingers dug into marble. Then the straw hat rose. The climber pulled himself up onto sacred ground. He stood before the assembled Holy Guard, dust on his vest, holes closing across his skin, a cannonball tucked under one arm like a souvenir. For a moment, nobody moved. The Holy Land behind them was perfect, white streets, golden domes. Clean fountains, trimmed gardens, statues of divine ancestors staring down in marble superiority. The air smelled faintly of flowers, expensive perfume, and a level of wealth that required other people to suffer very far away. Luffy looked around. He took one slow breath, then smiled. Fancy. The commander raised his sword. You stand upon holy ground, pirate. Luffy glanced down at his sandals, then scraped one foot against the marble. A black scuff appeared. The young guard heard several soldiers gasp as if he had stabbed a priest. Luffy looked back up. Still holy. The commander attacked. To his credit, he was fast. To history's disappointment, it did not help. Luffy moved through the formation like a bad joke told by a hurricane. He did not slaughter with rage. He did not roar. He did not declare war. He simply advanced, and every attempt to stop him became part of the scenery. A spear bent around his neck and snapped backward. A shield struck his face and rebounded into a fountain. A hacky-coated blade cut through his shoulder, and the wound closed before the wielder finished feeling hope. Soldiers flew into walls, fountains, hedges, decorative statues, and in one unfortunate case, a very expensive flower arrangement that had taken 6 gardeners 3 days to perfect. The chapter of history later written about this event would use phrases like, "The Holy Guard was routed and..." Defensive integrity collapsed. The young guard would have described it differently. A smiling man walked through everything they had, and none of it mattered. He found himself on the ground without remembering falling. His helmet had rolled away. His weapon was gone. Around him, soldiers groaned, crawled, or lay still in stunned silence. The marble street was cracked. The fountain was sideways. The flower arrangement would never recover. Luffy stood in the middle of the ruined formation, holding the cannonball. He looked at the young guard. The young guard froze. Luffy tossed him the cannonball. The boy caught it automatically and almost fell over from the weight. "Keep it," Luffy said. "You guys seemed attached." Then he walked past, into Mary Geoise. The Holy Land did not know how to react at first. It had been built on the assumption that the world below would always ask permission before entering. Every path was wide and clean. Every building gleamed. Slaves moved quietly in the background, trained to become invisible. Servants carried trays of food no hungry child would ever touch. Guards stood at corners, not because danger was expected, but because power liked decorations that could bleed. Luffy walked through it like a tourist with terrible manners. He stopped at a flower bed, picked a flower, ate it, chewed thoughtfully. Bad lettuce. Several noblewomen screamed. A servant dropped a tray. Luffy wandered to a fountain where sculpted angels poured water from golden bowls. He stared at it for a while, then pushed one statue over. It cracked against the marble. He nodded, satisfied. Better. Behind him, the first celestial dragon appeared. St. Roswald the Lesser was not important. This would have shocked him. He was a round man in a bubble helmet, carried in a luxurious seat by 4 trembling people whose names he had never bothered to learn. He wore layers of white cloth, medals he had not earned, and the expression of someone deeply offended by the existence of weather. He had been told there was an intruder. He had assumed this meant entertainment. When he saw Luffy standing beside the broken fountain, chewing on a second flower, his face reddened behind the glass. "You there," the celestial dragon shouted. "Filth, how dare you stand in my path?" Luffy looked around. There were several paths, he pointed to himself. "Me." The celestial dragon pulled a jeweled pistol from his robe. "Lower creatures must kneel." The servants carrying his seat began to shake. Luffy looked at the pistol. The celestial dragon fired. The bullet hit Luffy between the eyes. His head snapped back. Noblewomen gasped. Guards stiffened. The celestial dragon smiled with the satisfaction of a man who had never learned cause and effect could apply upward. Luffy's head rolled forward again. The hole closed. He scratched the spot absently, then looked at the celestial dragon with the mild irritation of someone whose nap had been interrupted by a mosquito with inheritance issues. That was rude. The celestial dragon stared. His mouth opened. No sound came out. Luffy stepped closer. The servants dropped the seat and fled. The celestial dragon toppled sideways with an indignant shriek, rolling across the marble in his bubble suit like an overwhelmed pearl. Luffy watched him roll, then laughed, not loudly, just enough. "Oh," he said, "that is funny." By then, panic had begun to spread through Mary Geoise. Not like normal panic had direction. Fire there, enemy there, escape here. This panic had no shape because the people experiencing it could not understand the problem. A pirate had entered the Holy Land. That was impossible. Guards had failed. That was impossible. A celestial dragon had fired and not been obeyed by reality. That was more than impossible. That was offensive. The city began to fracture emotionally before it fractured physically. Doors slammed. Alarms rang. Den Mushi screamed across command channels. Servants scattered. Nobles demanded explanations from people too terrified to invent good ones. And through it all, Luffy walked. He read plaques. He kicked statues. He stole meat from a banquet table set for people who would never know hunger. He found a monument celebrating the divine lineage of the 20 founders and laughed for 45 uninterrupted seconds. Not because he understood all of it, because he understood enough. The world government had spent 8 centuries building a religion around people who wore fishbowls on their heads and called breathing near commoners contamination. That was objectively hilarious. Meanwhile, the Straw Hats reached the upper city through chaos, theft, emergency access routes, and one truly inspired lie from Usopp involving a fake inspection order, a made-up sanitation crisis, and the phrase bubble helmet mold. They emerged into Mary Geoise expecting battle. They found silence, not total silence, worse. The kind of silence that comes after a large room has realized the clown is holding the knife. Usopp peeked around a column. The street ahead was cracked. Guards were scattered, mostly alive, deeply reconsidering their career paths. A fountain had been knocked sideways. A statue had a celestial dragon's bubble helmet stuck on its head. Someone had written God on a marble wall in soot. Nami stared. He's been here 10 minutes. Robin looked at the writing, perhaps 15. Sanji's face darkened as he saw the servants huddled in doorways, shaking, some still wearing collars, some too afraid to run even after their masters had fled. His anger shifted, not away from Luffy, but wider, deeper. "This place," he muttered. Jinbe's expression was grim. "Yes." Chopper hurried toward an injured guard, then stopped, unsure if helping the enemy was allowed in whatever nightmare this had become. He helped anyway. Of course he did. Zoro scanned the street. "Where is he?" a crash answered. They followed the sound through a wide avenue lined with gold-trimmed mansions and artificial gardens. The deeper they went, the more grotesque Mary Geoise became. Not because it was ugly, because it was beautiful, perfectly maintained, perfectly clean, perfectly removed from the world below. At the center of a grand plaza, they found him. Luffy sat on an enormous banquet table outside a celestial dragon palace, one leg crossed over the other, eating from a silver platter with his hands. Around him were scattered golden plates, overturned chairs, terrified nobles, and several lineage tablets stacked beside him like bedtime reading. He wore a stolen white cape over his shoulders. It did not suit him. That was probably why he liked it. He looked up as the Straw Hats arrived. "Hey." Sanji's eye twitched. "Do not hey us." Luffy held up a roasted leg of meat. "Food's good." Nami looked around at the trembling servants, the broken palace doors, the nobles hiding behind curtains. "What did you do?" "Learned stuff." Robin's gaze moved to the lineage tablets. Luffy picked one up and squinted at it. "Did you know these guys think they're gods?" Nobody answered. He looked genuinely delighted. "That's the funniest thing I've ever read." Usopp's voice was faint. "You said that about the bounty poster. This is funnier." A celestial dragon, emboldened by stupidity and generations of consequence-free living, crawled from beneath the table and pointed a shaking finger at him. "You cannot do this. We are descendants of the creators of the world. Luffy looked at him, then at the meat in his hand, then back at him. Did you create this? The celestial dragon blinked. What? Luffy held up the meat. This. Did you make it? I know, of course not. Then shut up. The celestial dragon made a strangled sound and fainted. Luffy nodded, as if the discussion had been productive. Sanji moved closer, voice low and dangerous. You think this is a joke? Luffy leaned back on one elbow. Mostly. These people have hurt millions. Yeah, they enslaved people. Looks like. They destroyed lives. Probably. Sanji's fist shook, and you're sitting here eating their food. Luffy looked at the platter, then pushed it toward him. Want some? Sanji kicked the table. It split in half. Food, silverware, and divine genealogy went everywhere. Luffy remained seated in midair for half a second longer than gravity appreciated, then dropped lightly onto the broken wood. For one moment, the two stared at each other. Sanji's face was fury and grief. Luffy's was curiosity. Then Robin spoke. The 5 elders know you are here. Luffy turned to her. Her voice remained calm, but her eyes were dark. They will not allow this to continue, he smiled. There are 5 of them. Yes, good number, Luffy, Nami said. He looked at her. She stepped through broken plates and scattered fruit until she stood close enough to hit him again if she wanted. This time she did not. You don't have to do this. His head tilted. Do what? Whatever this is. Whatever you think is funny, you can leave. We can go back. We can figure out what happened to you. For the first time since entering Mary Geoise, he was quiet. The plaza held its breath. Somewhere in the distance, bells rang. Soldiers shouted. The Holy Land gathered its remaining strength like a wounded beast pulling itself upright. Luffy looked at Nami. For a heartbeat, his expression changed. The grin faded, his eyes softened, not fully, not enough, but enough to hurt. Nami, he said, her breath caught, then he continued. I don't think I want to go back. The words were simple, almost gentle. They destroyed something anyway. Nami stepped away. Zoro's hand tightened around his sword. Chopper began crying silently. Luffy looked past them toward the highest towers of Mary Geoise, where power lived behind ancient doors and believed itself untouchable. His grin returned. Above the plaza, a den mushy speaker crackled to life. A voice spoke across the Holy Land, old and controlled and colder than law. Straw Hat Luffy. The entire city seemed to still. The 5 elders had spoken. You stand in the sacred capital of the world. You have assaulted its protectors, defiled its monuments, and threatened the divine order. Luffy glanced at the broken table. Threatened is a strong word. You will proceed no farther. The air changed from 5 directions. Pressure descended, not simple hacky, something older, heavier. The kind of authority that had sat behind thrones so long it had mistaken itself for gravity. Robin's face went pale. Jinbe lowered his stance. Zoro drew a blade. Sanji lit with flame. Even Luffy looked interested. At the far end of the plaza, 5 shadows appeared. The elders had not transformed yet. They did not need to. Their presence alone bent the mood of Mary Geoise. Guards who had been shaking found the strength to kneel. Celestial dragons sobbed with relief. Servants lowered their eyes. The city remembered its masters. The 5 elders walked forward together, ancient, cold, furious. For the first time since the Red Line climb began, Luffy stopped joking. He looked at them the way a child might look at 5 strange bugs under a glass. Then he smiled. Oh, he said. The eldest elder's eyes narrowed. You find this amusing? Luffy cracked his knuckles. No, he stepped off the broken banquet table. I think I might. Far beneath them, waves struck the base of the Red Line. The world held its breath. And Mary Geoise, holy and rotten and shining under the sun, prepared to learn what happened when absolute authority met someone who had lost all interest in meaning it. Chapter 3. Absolute justice meets absolute indifference. The Gorosei brawl. The 5 elders did not run. They had ruled too long to hurry. That was the first thing everyone noticed, not the pressure in the air, not the way guards bowed lower as they approached. Not the sudden silence swallowing Mary Geoise like the city itself had decided breathing was disrespectful. It was the walking, slow, measured, certain. The 5 elders crossed the shattered plaza with the calm of men who had never once wondered whether the world would obey them. Their robes moved in the wind. Their faces were cold, carved with age and authority. They did not look like warriors arriving at a battlefield. They looked like owners inspecting damaged property. Around them, the Holy Land tried to become itself again. Celestial dragons crawled out from beneath tables and behind curtains, their earlier terror souring into rage now that their ancient protectors had arrived. Guards dragged themselves upright, servants lowered their eyes. The broken fountain still leaked across the marble. The toppled statues still lay where Luffy had kicked them down. But the presence of the elders pulled order back over everything like a funeral cloth. For 800 years, this was how the world worked. Something terrible happened. The 5 elders appeared. The terrible thing stopped. That was the rule. Luffy stood in the middle of the plaza, stolen cape hanging from one shoulder, meat grease on his fingers, straw hat casting a shadow over his eyes. He looked at them, then looked around the plaza, then back at them. "So," he said, "you guys the managers." No one laughed. Not even Usopp, who had laughed at inappropriate times during earthquakes, naval sieges, haunted houses, and several near-death experiences involving frogs. One of the elders, tall and sharp-eyed, spoke first. "You stand before the highest authority in the world." Luffy nodded slowly. "Managers." Sanji shut his eyes. "He's going to get us killed." Zoro's blade was already half drawn. Maybe, Nami hissed. "That's the hopeful answer." Robin said nothing. Her gaze was fixed on the elders. Her whole life had been shaped by men like this. Not just powerful men, not just cruel men. Men who did not need to be present for their cruelty to function. There will moved through laws, soldiers, bounties, newspapers, assassins, lies, and fear. They were not simply people. They were the architecture of oppression, and now they were standing close enough to hear Luffy insult them. Robin did not know whether to feel satisfaction or dread, possibly both. The bald elder with the sword stepped forward. His hand rested on the hilt. "Monkey D. Luffy," he said, "you have overstepped your role." Luffy blinked. "My role? You are a pirate, a criminal, a disruption. Even your most outrageous actions served a pattern the world could understand." Luffy scratched his cheek. The elder's eyes narrowed. "This does not." Luffy's grin spread. "Oh," he said, "that's what's bothering you." The air sharpened. The elder drew his sword. It was not a dramatic movement. No flourish, no wasted motion. The blade appeared in his hand as if it had always been there and the world had only just been informed. Zoro's eye widened slightly. That tiny reaction told the rest of the crew more than any explanation could. The sword was dangerous. The elder moved. The slash crossed the plaza, not a flying cut in the simple sense, not a shockwave of air. It was a line of decision. The marble split. The broken banquet table separated cleanly. A row of golden pillars behind Luffy slid apart at perfect angles. The attack did not seem to travel so much as declare that everything along its path was already cut. Luffy's head came off. Nami screamed. Chopper cried out. Sanji lunged. Then Luffy's severed head bounced once off the marble, stretched back toward his body like rubber pulled from both ends, and snapped into place with a wet pop that was somehow more comedic than comforting. He blinked, looked down at himself, then looked at the swordsman elder. Neat trick. The elder's expression did not change, but the air around him did. For the first time, something like irritation entered the ancient stillness. Zoro stared at the blade. "That cut him," he muttered. Sanji's face was pale. "Apparently not enough." Luffy rolled his neck. "It cracked several times in ways necks should not." "Okay," he said. "My turn." The 5 elders moved together. That was when the plaza stopped being a plaza. The first elder transformed, his body expanded, bones warping, robes tearing into shadow and scale. The air filled with a deep, mythic pressure as his human shape gave way to something vast and ancient. Horns curved through smoke. Eyes burned with intelligence that had survived centuries. The ground beneath him cracked beneath the weight of a creature that belonged less to nature than nightmare. The second followed, then the third, then the fourth, then the fifth. The transformation of the 5 elders was not like ordinary Zoan power. It was not just animal force. It carried story, old terror. The accumulated fear of generations who had whispered about demons in power and never realized how literal they were being. Mary Geo's darkened beneath their presence. Clouds gathered above the Holy Land. The marble trembled. The celestial dragons stopped cheering. Even they, in their inherited stupidity, felt the wrongness of what protected them. 5 monstrous shapes surrounded Luffy. each radiating a different flavor of ancient authority. One towered like a nightmare beast carved from famine. One coiled with impossible speed, its movements too smooth for its size. One stood armored in bristling defense, every inch promising that attacks against it would be punished. One pulsed with toxic spiritual force, the air around it bending. One held the sword still, somehow more terrifying in hybrid form than full transformation, as though restraint made him sharper. Against any other pirate, any admiral, any emperor, any revolutionary army, this would have been the end of an age. The straw hats felt it. That mattered. Jinbe, who had faced warlords and emperors, widened his stance and quietly moved in front of Nami and Chopper. Sanji's flames dimmed for half a second under the pressure before burning hotter. Zoro drew all three swords. Robin's hands rose, ready to bloom limbs wherever she needed them, though a cold, logical part of her mind knew exactly how little that might matter. Usopp whispered, "We are so far past bad idea." Luffy looked around at the 5 titanic forms, his grin came back. "Okay," he said, "that's better." They attacked with perfect coordination, not rage, not panic, strategy. The elders had not ruled for centuries because they were merely strong. Strength was common in the New World. Monsters were everywhere. The sea produced them as easily as storms. The elders were terrifying because they understood control. One forced Luffy backward with overwhelming pressure, not to damage him, but to position him. Another closed the escape angle. The swordsman targeted joints, head, and centerline in cuts precise enough to separate even rubber into useless pieces. The largest elder struck the ground and folded the plaza upward, using Mary Geoise itself as a weapon. Another released a pulse that made the air heavy, slowing movement, choking momentum, attempting to crush Luffy beneath invisible command. It was brilliant. It was ancient. It was the accumulated tactical wisdom of beings who had survived everything the world had thrown at them. And it failed because every assumption beneath it was wrong. Luffy was hit from 3 directions at once. His body flattened against the marble like a painted sticker. For one beautiful, impossible second, he was two-dimensional. Then his eyes blinked from the flattened shape. He peeled himself off the ground with a sound like wet paper. Ha! The large elder lunged. Luffy inflated his torso at the last moment. The attack sank into rubber and rebounded with a comic springing sound that echoed across the plaza in a way no divine battlefield should ever have allowed. The elder staggered, not hurt, offended. That seemed to amuse Luffy more. His hair began to lighten, the air shifted. Zoro felt it first. He had seen this before. They all had. The drums in Wano, those drums had sounded like liberation. Ridiculous, impossible, joyful liberation. The heartbeat of a sun god who fought like laughter had become a weapon. Gear 5 had been absurd, but it had been warm. It had made allies believe. It had made tyrants look small. Now the sound returned, doom, 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 but it was slower somehow, lower, like laughter echoing in an empty room. Luffy's hair turned white, steam curled around him. His clothes shifted with that strange awakened freedom, reality loosening its collar wherever he stood. His grin stretched wide, too wide, his eyes bright with wild cartoon light. For half a second, the straw hats forgot what had changed. Because he looked like Luffy again, then he laughed, and remembered this was not joy. This was boredom with godlike tools. Gear 5 bloomed over Mary Geoise. The broken marble beneath Luffy softened like rubber. Cracks stretched and wobbled. A fallen statue blinked, briefly confused about its own existence, before flopping sideways like melted wax. The air bent around him in thick white curves. The laws of the world began taking suggestions from a lunatic. One elder charged. Luffy grabbed him by the horns, spun him overhead, and bounced him against the ground, once, twice, 3 times. The plaza stretched beneath each impact like a trampoline, launching the elder higher each time. The sound effect was ridiculous, almost cheerful. Several celestial dragons screamed. One fainted into a dessert cart. Luffy laughed and turned the elder into a paddleball, not literally forever, not permanently. But for those few horrible seconds, the ancient monster who had shaped history became a rubber toy attached to Luffy's finger by a strand of white reality. Boing, boing. Boing, Usopp's face had gone completely blank. That should be funny, he whispered. Chopper was shaking. It isn't. The elder tore free with a roar that cracked windows across the plaza. His form reasserted itself, Haki exploding outward in a wave of black lightning. The blast hit Luffy full in the chest. He skidded backward, sandals carving twin lines through rubberized marble. For the first time, his smile twitched, not pain, interest. Okay, he said. You do hit hard. The swordsman elder appeared behind him. The blade flashed. This time, the cut carried something more than sharpness. Ancient haki, refined past ordinary willpower, layered with the authority of centuries. It sliced through Gear 5 bending influence. It cut the rubberized air. It cut Luffy across the back and forced a real wound to open. Blood hit the marble, the straw hats froze. Luffy looked over his shoulder, the wound closed, but not instantly, not quite. The swordsman elder noticed, so did everyone. Luffy smiled slowly. There it is. The elders adjusted immediately, no speech, no surprise wasted, they had learned. All five pressed harder. The next exchange shook Mary GOIs. One elder used mass and spiritual force to pin Luffy in place. Another attacked the ground beneath him, trying to collapse him into a sealed pit. The toxic elder filled the space with invisible corruption that warped even awakened rubber, making the air snap and recoil. The swordsman cut whenever Luffy regenerated, forcing the body to spend more and more energy repairing itself. The final elder channeled a pulse of authority through the plaza itself, turning the Holy Land's accumulated fear into pressure. For several minutes, the fight became something close to real. Luffy was battered across the plaza, thrown through a palace wall, smashed into a tower. Dragged through 3 decorative gardens and 1 private museum of stolen national treasures, he came back every time, laughing. But the laugh grew sharper. The elders were not weak. They were not fools. They were doing everything correctly. They attacked his regeneration windows. They disrupted his footing. They separated his head, crushed his limbs, overloaded his awakened field, and tried to force Gear 5 to burn itself out. Against Kaido, this would have been catastrophic pressure. Against any living thing with normal rules, it would have ended the battle. Against Lobo, wearing Luffy's body, it was starting to become entertainment. Luffy shot out of the wrecked museum wearing 3 stolen crowns stacked crookedly on his head. Do these make me king of something? The largest elder answered by slamming him into the ground so hard the crowns flew off and embedded themselves in a wall. Luffy's face flattened against the marble. His thumb slowly rose. Good answer. Sanji took 1 step forward. Zoro's arm blocked him. Sanji glared. Move. No. He's getting hit. He's letting them. Sanji's jaw clenched. That doesn't make it better. Zoro did not look away from the battle. I know. That was the thing none of them wanted to admit. Luffy could fight smarter. He could dodge. He could counter. He could end exchanges earlier. He was choosing not to, not out of honor, not out of pride, because being hurt was, to him, apparently part of testing whether something was interesting. Nami looked at Robin. Can they stop him? Robin's answer took too long. No, she finally said. Chopper squeezed his hat. But they hurt him. Yes, then maybe no, Robin said again, softer. Hurting him and stopping him are not the same thing. Across the plaza, the elders prepared their next formation. The air above them darkened. Haki gathered like a storm being folded into a blade. The ground beneath Mary GOIs glowed faintly with old symbols, ancient mechanisms, and buried power networks the public had never known existed. The Holy Land was not merely a city. It was a fortress built on secrets. The elders had decided to stop treating Luffy as a pirate. They would treat him as a calamity. The swordsman elder raised his blade, the others aligned. Their powers overlapped, not clumsily but with practiced precision. Mythical force, ancient haki, spiritual command, environmental control, regenerative denial. The atmosphere itself began to scream under the strain. Jin's eyes widened. Everyone back. He did not shout. He did not need to. The straw hats moved. A pillar of force descended onto Luffy. It was not one attack. It was 5 histories of violence agreeing on a single point. The plaza vanished in white and black pressure. Sound disappeared. For several heartbeats, no one heard anything, not the alarms, not the screams, not the crumbling towers. Only the deep, crushing absence left by power too large for human senses to process properly. When sound returned, It came as a rolling boom that threw guards from their feet and shattered every window facing the plaza. Smoke covered everything. Nami coughed. Usopp dragged Chopper behind a broken wall. Sanji stood in front of them, flames burning blue at his heels. Zoro had all 3 swords ready. Robin's hands trembled once before she hid them in her sleeves. The elders stood around the impact zone, breathing heavily. For the first time they looked old, not weak, old, ancient beings who had spent something they did not like spending. The smoke thinned. A shape stood in the crater. Luffy's body was damaged. That was undeniable. His vest was shredded. His skin smoked in places where reality had tried to reject him. One arm hung wrong for half a second before twisting back into place. The white aura of Gear 5 flickered unevenly around him. He stood with his head lowered. No one moved. Then he yawned, loudly, rudely, completely. He lifted one hand and scratched his stomach. "Are you guys actually trying?" he asked. "Because it's hard to tell." The largest elder roared, not strategically, not with control, with rage. There it was. The crack, the tiny fracture in 8 centuries of authority. Luffy saw it and smiled. "Ah," he said. "There you are." He moved. This time he stopped playing defense. The world bent with him. He grabbed the ground and pulled. The plaza rolled upward like a carpet, taking 2 elders off their feet. He stepped onto the curling marble as if surfing, launched himself from it, and drove both feet into the armored elder's chest. The impact bounced the elder backward through a palace gate and into a courtyard full of priceless statues. Luffy followed, grabbed one statue, looked at it, decided it was ugly and used it like a bat. The toxic elder struck from behind, jaws opening, force spilling outward. Luffy stretched his neck backward, his head spinning around with cartoon impossibility until he faced the attack upside down. Boo. He exhaled, not fire, not hacky, just a ridiculous blast of air that inflated the toxic cloud like a balloon. The cloud swelled, squeaked, and floated upward before popping harmlessly above the roofline. The elder stared. Luffy kicked him into a bell tower. The bell rang once. A deep, holy note rolled across Mary Geoise. Luffy listened, then kicked the tower again. The bell rang louder. He grinned. Music. The swordsman elder cut through the absurdity, blade flashing toward Luffy's neck. Luffy's eyes sharpened. For one instant, the cartoon looseness vanished. He caught the blade between 2 fingers. The shockwave behind the stopped strike split 3 buildings. Luffy looked at the sword, then at the elder. Zoro inhaled, because that was not Gear 5. That was Haki, deep, black, monstrous Haki. Luffy's fingers darkened. The blade trembled between them. The swordsman elder tried to pull back. Luffy leaned closer. "You're good," he said. The elder's eyes narrowed. Luffy smiled. "But you're serious." He flicked the blade. The sword screamed. The elder shot backward across the plaza, boots carving trenches through marble before he slammed into the monument of the 20 founders. The monument cracked from base to crown. A celestial dragon cried out as though the stone were a relative. Luffy turned to the remaining elders. Serious gets old fast. The next few minutes became less a battle than a dismantling of dignity. He did not destroy them completely. That would have required focus. Instead, he humiliated them by accident. One elder was stretched like rubber and snapped into a wall mural depicting divine justice. Another was folded into the shape of a chair for exactly 3 seconds before bursting free in fury. A third was launched upward, bounced off a cloud that had temporarily become rubber, and came down through the roof of a noble bathhouse. Every time the elders reasserted their power, Luffy answered with something worse than strength: irreverence. They were beings of myth. He treated them like props. And that, more than damage, began to break something. Authority requires witnesses to believe in the shape of it. Mary Geoise was witnessing its god's bodyguards get turned into slapstick. The servants saw, the guards saw, the celestial dragons saw, the straw hats saw, and no one would be able to unsee it. At the edge of the plaza, a little servant boy with a collar around his neck stared with wide eyes as an elder crashed through a golden archway. His mother tried to pull him away. The boy whispered, "They can fall." His mother covered his mouth immediately. But the words had already entered the world. They can fall. Robin heard it. So did Nami. So did the guards standing nearby. 3 words, more dangerous than any punch Luffy had thrown. The elders sensed the shift. For the first time, their objective changed, not victory, containment. The swordsman elder, battered but standing, raised one hand. Enough. The others withdrew by instinct. Their forms were damaged, not crippled, not defeated in the ordinary sense, but marked. Their ancient bodies smoked, cracked, regenerated slowly. Their eyes burned with hate, but beneath it lay calculation. The eldest elder looked at Luffy. "You are not Monkey D. Luffy." The plaza went still. The straw hats froze. Luffy stood among the ruins, white hair drifting like smoke. For once, he did not grin immediately. The elder continued, voice cold and certain. "We have studied that boy, his history, his habits, his threat profile, his ridiculous mercy, his irrational attachments, his predictable defiance. You wear his face, but you are not him." Silence stretched. Nami's fingers curled into fists. Sanji looked ready to kill the elder for saying aloud what they feared. Zoro's stare never left Luffy. Luffy looked down at his own hands, white, rubber, scarred, healing. Then he looked at the straw hats, at Nami's anger, Chopper's tears, Sanji's fury, Robin's grief hidden behind stillness. Frankie's wounded silence, Usopp's fear, Jinbe's sorrow, Zoro's challenge. For a moment the drums softened, something flickered, not enough, but something. Zoro stepped forward. Luffy. The name crossed the battlefield like a rope thrown into deep water. Luffy turned to him. Zoro drew his swords fully. "This isn't you." He did not say it like Nami, not as a plea, not as grief. He said it like a fact before a duel. Luffy stared at him for a long time. The elders watched carefully, so did everyone else. Then Luffy's expression changed, not back to Luffy, never that clean. But the grin faded into something almost gentle. "I know," he said. Zoro's eye narrowed. Luffy tilted his head. So, the word hit harder than any attack. Zoro did not move. For a second, it looked like he might. Then Luffy turned away from him and went back to the elders. Whatever small hope had risen in the crew did not die dramatically. It simply dropped, like something let go. The elders launched their final gambit. This time, there was no formation, no prolonged exchange. They gathered everything, the full authority of the world government's hidden rulers. Ancient haki refined across centuries. Mythical Zoan power drawn from forms older than recorded history. The spiritual weight of Mary Geoise itself. The belief of generations who had feared them, obeyed them, cursed them, and died beneath systems they maintained. Power rose like a second red line. The sky blackened, the plaza buckled. Every den mushy in the Holy Land screamed static. The straw hats were forced backward by pressure alone. Chopper could not stand. Usopp pulled him close. Nami's climb attack sparked wildly. Sanji braced with both legs aflame. Zoro crossed his swords and still slid back. Jinbe planted himself like an anchor. Robin's eyes watered from the pressure, but she refused to look away. Luffy stood at the center, white hair whipping upward, smile gone. The elders struck. This was not an attack meant to hurt. It was meant to erase resistance as a concept. The blast swallowed him. The crater deepened. The ground tore open. The sound was enormous, then silent, then enormous again. Mary Geoise shook from one end to the other. Towers leaned. Domes cracked. The monument of the founders split and collapsed into dust. For several seconds, the world became impact. Then it ended. Smoke rose. The 5 elders stood around the crater, barely upright. Their monstrous forms flickered. The eldest elder dropped to one knee. No one spoke. The smoke thinned slowly. At the center of the crater stood Luffy, no longer laughing, no longer fully in Gear 5. His white hair faded in patches. Steam rolled from his shoulders. His body was marked by the attack, regenerating in slow, visible waves. His straw hat had fallen behind him, but he was standing. He bent down. Picked up the hat, dusted it off carefully. That was the most Luffy thing he had done all day. The crew saw it, every one of them. He placed the hat on his head, then looked at the elders. "Okay," he said. "That one was almost something." The eldest elder stared. For the first time in centuries, his face did not contain authority, only disbelief. Luffy walked toward him. The elder tried to stand. His body refused for half a second too long. Luffy stopped in front of him and crouched. The entire Holy Land seemed to lean in. The pirate and the ruler stared at one another. Luffy spoke quietly. "You know the funniest part?" The elder said nothing. "You guys really thought you were the top of the joke." He stood, then turned away. The elder's eyes widened. "You are leaving?" Luffy stretched his arms above his head. "Yeah." "We are not finished." Luffy looked back over his shoulder and smiled, not with anger, not with hatred, with boredom. "I am." That broke them, not physically. Worse. The 5 elders had survived wars, rebellions, ancient enemies, forbidden knowledge, pirates with impossible dreams, and the slow grind of history. They had accepted the possibility of death in the abstract, the way immortal rulers sometimes keep a knife in a drawer and call it humility. But dismissal, being spared because killing them was not interesting enough. That was a wound no regeneration could close. Luffy walked away from the broken plaza, past the stunned guards, past the trembling celestial dragons, past the servants who watched him with fear and something dangerously close to wonder. The Straw Hats followed because they did not know how not to. Zoro sheathed his swords. Sanji's fists remained clenched. Nami stared at the back of the straw hat. Chopper wiped his face. Robin looked once at the shattered monument of the 20 founders and understood with terrible clarity that history had just cracked open. Behind them, the eldest elder dragged himself across broken marble. His hand reached for a den mushi, half buried in rubble. The snail trembled as he lifted it. He pressed the receiver, static. His breath caught. He tried another frequency, static. Another, static. The private line to the empty throne was dead. The elder slowly looked toward the highest tower of Mary Geoise, toward the hidden place no citizen knew. Toward the secret king of the world. His face changed, because now he understood. Luffy had not left because the fight was over. He had left because something more interesting had finally answered. Far above the ruined plaza, in the forbidden heart of Mary Geoise, a shadow moved behind ancient doors, and the elder, face pressed to cracked marble, whispered a name no one was meant to hear. Imu. The den mushi hissed static. The line stayed dead. Luffy was already there. Chapter 4. The joke on the throne. Imu. The final confrontation. There were places in Mary Geoise that did not officially exist. That was the first rule of true power. A palace could be mapped. A fortress could be scouted. A throne room could become a symbol. Symbols were dangerous because people could imagine reaching them. So the deepest chamber of the Holy Land was not called a chamber. It was not drawn on architectural plans. It was not guarded by ordinary soldiers because guards could speak. It was not cleaned by servants because servants could remember. It existed in the blank spaces between official corridors, behind doors that were not there unless one already knew how to look, beyond staircases whose steps did not echo, past walls that seemed carved not from marble, but from the idea of silence. The empty throne waited there. It was enormous, cold, ancient, a seat built less for comfort than accusation. It stood beneath high, shadowed arches, surrounded by weapons planted into the floor by kings who had once promised no single ruler would stand above the world. 20 blades, 20 lies. The room was shaped around absence, around the performance of nobody sitting where everyone secretly knelt. For 800 years, the world had been told the throne was empty. That was the joke. The throne had never been empty. Something sat behind the world, something old enough to remember when history still had all its pages. Something that had watched kingdoms burn, languages vanish, islands disappear, and generations of fools look up at the sky and call the weather destiny. Imu stood before the throne when Luffy arrived, not sitting, waiting. That was how the Straw Hats found them. Luffy had reached the chamber first, of course. Nobody knew how. One moment he had been walking away from the broken plaza, still smoking faintly from the Gorosei's final attack. The next, he was gone, as if boredom had taught him teleportation. The crew had followed signs of damage through corridors that should not have connected, past shattered doors, past walls punched open from the wrong side, past several den mushi wires cut cleanly through. Now they stood at the entrance of the hidden throne room, staring into a place the world was not meant to see. Nami's breath caught. "So it's true," she whispered. Robin did not answer. Her eyes were fixed on the throne. For most of her life, she had chased history through fragments, burned books, broken stones, forbidden names, dead scholars, government lies stacked so high they had become a second sky. Every clue had pointed toward a wound hidden beneath the world. Now she was looking at the hand that had covered it. Her face was still, but her eyes were not. Sanji stepped forward, then stopped. Even he felt it. The room was wrong, not haunted. Haunted places remembered death. This place had denied death the dignity of being remembered. The air felt pressed flat. Sound entered and became smaller. The shadows did not move like ordinary shadows. They seemed to watch from corners, thin and patient and full of old decisions. Zoro's hand went to his swords. Jinbe lowered his center of gravity. Usopp peeked from behind a cracked pillar and immediately wished he had chosen a career in agriculture. Chopper's fur stood on end. Frankie, still quiet from everything that had happened to the Sunny, stared at the throne with wide, offended eyes. That thing is not super. Brook's jaw hung open. Yo-ho-ho, I would say this room has a deathly atmosphere, but even I feel unwelcome. No one laughed. At the center of the chamber, Luffy stood with his hands in his pockets, looking at Imu. Imu was smaller than the room wanted them to be. That was the first surprise. The secret ruler of the world did not tower like Kaido, did not radiate explosive force like Big Mom, did not carry the open violence of an admiral. Their shape was thin, cloaked, crowned by darkness and old authority. Their face remained hidden, not by cloth alone, but by the sense that sight itself hesitated around them. But power does not need size. A blade can be smaller than a door and still decide who enters. Imu looked at Luffy. Luffy looked at Imu. Then Luffy looked past Imu. At the empty throne, his eyes brightened. "Oh," he said. "That's tacky," Nami whispered. "Please don't." He walked past Imu, just walked. The secret king of the world stood there, radiating ancient horror, and Luffy wandered around them like a tourist trying to find the best seat at a bad restaurant. The straw hats froze. The throne room froze. Possibly history froze. Luffy climbed the steps to the empty throne, turned around. Sat down. He leaned back, stretched one leg over the armrest, propped both feet where no feet had been allowed to rest for 800 years, and patted his vest pockets. His expression fell. No cigar. The silence became physically painful. Usopp made a noise like a kettle giving up. Sanji covered his eyes with one hand. He sat on it. Zoro's mouth twitched once, not quite a smile, but close enough to be concerning. Imu did not move. That was more frightening than anger. The shadows in the room lengthened. The weapons around the throne trembled in the floor. The air thinned until breathing felt like negotiating. Luffy glanced down from the throne. "You want it back," Imu spoke. The voice did not sound loud. It sounded near, directly beside the ear, behind the eyes, inside the memory of fear. "You are not Nika," Luffy blinked. "Nope. You wear his shape. Sometimes you carry his fruit, pretty chewy. You sit upon a throne you do not understand." Luffy shifted, trying to get comfortable. "I understand chairs." The shadows moved. The first attack came without motion. One moment Luffy sat on the throne. The next, the right side of his body vanished, not cut, not burned, not crushed, gone. Nami screamed. Chopper stumbled forward. Luffy. The missing half of him was simply absent, erased from the room as if reality had decided it had never approved of that portion of pirate. For one impossible second, he remained seated, one eye wide, half a mouth still curved. Then black-red regeneration boiled across the missing space. Flesh, rubber, bone, impossible biology, and Gear 5 residue rewrote themselves at frantic speed. The vanished half returned in uneven waves, snapping and stretching back into shape. Luffy fell off the throne. He hit the steps, rolled, and landed crouched at the base. The grin was gone. He looked at Imu. For the first time since Mary Geo's began falling apart, he looked genuinely interested. "Well," he said, "that's rude in a new way." The crew understood immediately. This was different. The Marines had been irrelevant. The Holy Guard had been overwhelmed. The Celestial Dragons had been a joke. The Gorosei had been monsters, yes, but monsters who still lived inside a world of force, wounds, endurance, and will. Imu did not attack the body. Imu edited the sentence. Robin's voice was barely audible. "Reality erasure." Usopp swallowed. "I hate those words together." Imu raised one hand. The chamber darkened. Above the throne, a shape unfolded in the air. Not a creature, not exactly. A silhouette of authority so absolute that the mind tried to simplify it into something understandable and failed. Crown, wings, blade, shadow, serpent, void, all of them and none of them. Imu's true power did not transform like the Gorosei. It revealed that the smaller shape had only been a bookmark. The room stretched. The ceiling seemed suddenly too low for what Imu was. The empty throne cracked behind them. Luffy stood, his white hair ignited again. Gear 5 rolled over him, but this time the drums sounded strained from the first beat. Doom, 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 he smiled. But even that smile had edges of concentration. Imu's hand lowered. The floor between them disappeared, not collapsed, disappeared. A perfectly round absence opened where marble had been, revealing not basement or stone beneath, but nothing. No dust, no rubble, no falling pieces, just a whole reality refused to fill. Luffy jumped aside. A thread of erasure grazed his arm. The limb vanished from elbow down. It grew back before he landed, but slower. Sanji cursed under his breath. Zoro's eye sharpened. He dodged. Nami looked at him. What? He dodged. That scared them more than if he had been hit. Luffy had ignored cannon fire, sword strikes, mythic beasts, ancient haki, divine monuments. But here, instinct moved him before arrogance could laugh. Imu saw it too. You can be ended. Luffy rolled his new wrist, testing the fingers. Everybody says that. I do not speak of death. The shadows around Imu sharpened. I speak of removal, your body, your name, your impact, your memory. I have erased islands from maps and minds. I have removed bloodlines until even grief forgot what it was mourning. I have made history obey. Robin's face turned pale. O'Hara burned behind her eyes. Luffy's grin faded again, not because he understood the full historical weight. Because something in Robin's silence reached him before thought did. He glanced back at her. For the smallest moment, the old Luffy was there in the angle of his body, not words, position. He stood between Robin and Imu. He did not seem to realize he had done it. Robin did, her breath caught. Nami did too, Sanji's expression twisted with pain. Luffy looked forward again, unaware of the wound he had reopened by proving something was still there. Imu attacked. The throne room became a storm of absence. Lines of erasure carved through pillars, walls, steps, air. Each strike removed whatever it touched so completely the surrounding world had to pause and decide how to connect around the missing space. Gear 5 warped the floor into rubber, bouncing Luffy between attacks, bending broken architecture into shields, stretching distance itself into loops. But Imu's power did not play. It cut through the joke. A rubber wall vanished. A cartoon cloud disappeared. A stretched floor snapped back into rigid marble before being erased in a clean black arc. Luffy laughed, but now the laugh had effort in it. He swung one massive inflated fist toward Imu. The punch filled the chamber, haki coating it so thick the air cracked. Imu did not dodge. The fist struck. For a heartbeat, the impact seemed to land. The whole hidden chamber shook. The throne split further. The 20 royal weapons vibrated in the floor. Then the fist began disappearing from the knuckles backward. Luffy's eyes widened. He pulled back hard, snapping his arm away before the erasure reached his shoulder. Regeneration surged again, rebuilding the lost hand. He landed on the cracked throne steps and shook his fingers as they reformed. Okay, he said. You're annoying. Imu glided forward. You should not exist. Been hearing that since I woke up. You are not of this world. Luffy stretched his neck left and right. Neither are half the stupid things in it. You are a mistake. That made him grin. There we go. Something honest. The next exchange broke the throne room open. Luffy turned the shattered floor into a bouncing field and launched himself around Imu from every angle. His fists came from the ceiling, the walls, beneath the floor, from impossible curves in Space Gear 5 folded like paper. Each blow carried conquerors' haki strong enough to knock out armies. Imu erased them, not all, not perfectly. That was the danger for both. Every time Imu removed an attack, Luffy regenerated, redirected, or made the missing space part of the joke. Every time Luffy got close, Imu's body blurred into shadow and meaning, slipping away from physical impact unless the haki struck true. The battle was no longer one-sided. It was absurdity against authority. A cartoon sun god's body hijacked by an immortal nihilist against the hidden ruler of a world built on controlled memory. The room could not survive the argument. A pillar vanished. The ceiling cracked. Moonlight poured through from somewhere it should not have been able to reach. A wall burst outward, exposing Mary Geoise below. The ruined Holy Land sprawled beneath them, alarms still ringing, fires burning in controlled patches, guards moving like ants around broken divinity. The world's highest city looked small from the secret throne. Luffy saw it and laughed. Imu's shadow struck him through the chest, not piercing, removing. A circle of his torso disappeared. Chopper cried out and tried to run forward. Jinb grabbed him. No, he's hurt. If you go in there, you will be gone. Chopper struggled anyway, tears streaming. He's my captain. Jinb's grip tightened, but his voice broke slightly. I know. Luffy staggered. For the first time, he dropped to one knee. The hole in his torso regenerated violently, white steam and dark blood-like energy twisting together. His breathing turned heavy. Gear 5 flickered. The straw hats saw the opening. So did Imu. You are not immune, Imu said. Luffy coughed once, then looked up. His smile returned. Never said I was. He sprang forward, not away, forward. Imu erased the space before him. Luffy punched through the edge of absence, letting half his arm vanish to close the distance. His other fist stretched around from behind, coated in black lightning. Imu turned, shadow rising. The punch landed for the first time. Imu moved from impact, not far, one step. But one step from a being who had ruled unseen for 800 years was an earthquake in the language of power. The chamber felt it. Robin felt it. The broken elders below, still crawling from the plaza, felt it without knowing why. Imu slowly turned back. The hidden face remained obscured. But the atmosphere changed. Anger had entered the room, not cold authority. Anger, you dare. Luffy flexed his regrown hand. Finally. Imu rose. The shadow behind them expanded until it filled the chamber, the broken ceiling, the exposed sky. Merry Geo eyes darkened beneath it. The moon itself seemed to dim. The 20 royal weapons around the throne pulled free from the floor and floated in the air, spinning slowly, each one carrying the weight of a kingdom that had surrendered its sovereignty to a lie. Robin whispered, "Those weapons." Nami looked at her. "The founding kings," Robin said. "Their promise." The weapons turned point first toward Luffy. Imu spoke, and the voice was everywhere, then be forgotten. The weapons fired, not thrown, activated. Each became a line of erasure. 20 histories turned into blades of nothing. They converged on Luffy from every direction. For one instant, he was boxed in. No dodge, no angle, no joke. The crew watched the attack close around him, and Luffy laughed, not loudly, not like before, a low chuckle, almost appreciative. Gear 5 surged. He grabbed the air, literally grabbed it. His fingers dug into empty space and pulled the world around himself like a rubber sheet. The 20 erasure lines bent inward, warped by cartoon physics they were not designed to respect. They did not stop. They could not be blocked, but they could be made ridiculous. Luffy twisted the sheet of reality and tied it into a knot. For half a second, the 20 lines of erasure tangled together like strings. Then they detonated. The explosion did not produce fire. It produced blankness. A chunk of the throne room vanished. The blast threw everyone backward. Zoro dug his swords into the floor to stop himself. Sanji caught Nami. Jinb shielded Chopper and Usopp with his own body. Robin bloomed hands across the wall to anchor herself. Frankie slammed one arm into a pillar. Brook's skull spun around once before he slapped it straight. When the blankness cleared, Luffy stood at the center of a missing circle of reality. Barely, his body was half regenerated, flickering between rubber, flesh, and white cartoon outline. His grin shook. The drums of liberation stuttered. Doom, 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 doom. Imu descended. You are finite. Luffy breathed hard. For the first time, he looked tired. That frightened the crew more than anything else. Imu extended one hand toward his forehead. Even a mistake can be corrected. The shadows closed around Luffy. Then something strange happened. Nothing. Imu's hand hovered before him. The erasure gathered. The room bent. The power that had deleted islands, memories, bloodlines, and truth itself focused on the man wearing the straw hat, and slipped, not failed explosively, not resisted by greater power, slipped like water off rubber. Imu stopped. The air froze. Luffy opened one eye. Imu tried again. The power sharpened. Reality around Luffy's shoulders vanished in flickers, but the core of him remained. His body regenerated what disappeared, yes, but that was not the real issue. Something deeper refused to catch. Imu's power erased meaning, names. Places, histories, importance. It attacked the relationship between a thing and the world that recognized it. But Lobo, Luffy's inner self, was a broken joke. He did not cling to identity. He did not care whether the world remembered him. He did not want legacy, throne, justice, revenge, freedom, or salvation. Even Luffy's dream of pirate king sat inside him like an old photograph in a room he rarely entered. You could erase a king, you could erase a hero, you could erase a revolutionary, you could erase a god. But how does one erase someone who does not believe his own existence is important enough to defend? Imu's power slid across him and found no handle. Luffy stared, then slowly smiled. "Oh," he said, "that's funny." Imu stepped back, just one step, the same step Luffy's punch had forced earlier. But this one was different. This one was fear. The secret ruler of the world had spent centuries as the author of absence. To erase was to define. To remove was to prove supremacy. Every enemy had believed in something. Every kingdom had roots. Every rebellion had memory. Every dream had a shape that could be targeted. This thing did not. Imu spoke, and for the first time the voice was not absolute. "What are you?" The question moved through the broken throne room like a crack through glass. Luffy considered it. Genuinely, he looked at his hands, at the straw hat. At the crew watching him with fear and grief. At the broken empty throne, at Imu, then he shrugged. Honestly, he scratched his cheek. "I'm not totally sure," a pause. "But I think I'm the bit at the end where everything stops being serious." He moved. Imu raised both hands. Erasure lashed out. Luffy went through it. Pieces of him vanished and returned. His shoulder disappeared, regenerated. His face tore into blankness, snapped back grinning. His legs flickered, stretched, reformed. Gear 5 roared around him, not joyful now, but manic, wild, impossible. He was being erased and refusing to make it meaningful. Imu retreated. The hidden ruler of the world retreated from a pirate on foot. The throne cracked behind them. Luffy's fist darkened. Haki rolled over it. Not elegant, not noble, not liberating, just big. He hit Imu. The blow drove the secret king through the base of the empty throne. The sound was not thunder. It was furniture breaking that made it worse. The throne split in half. Imu struck the rear wall, shadow splintering around them. The ancient aura flickered. The vast shape behind them collapsed inward, not gone, but wounded, forced into something smaller. Luffy followed, no speech, no grand declaration. No, "I will be king of the pirates." No promise to free the world. No righteous anger for Ohara, Alabasta, Dressrosa, Wano, Fishman Island, or every place the world government had crushed beneath clean white boots. Just a second punch, then a third. The battle did not become heroic. It became anticlimactic in the cruelest way. Imu had prepared for prophecy. For Joy Boy, for Nika. For the will of D, for ancient weapons, for a final war, for meaning. Instead, the end arrived as a man with Luffy's face and Lobo's soul punching the secret king of the world through a chair because the whole thing had gotten boring. When it was over, Imu was not dead. That would have made a martyr, a legend, a return, a warning carved into myth. Instead, Imu lay buried beneath the broken foundation of the throne room, pinned under shattered stone, cracked weapons, and pieces of the seat that had symbolized the greatest lie in history. Alive, conscious. Irrelevant. Luffy stood over the rubble, breathing hard. His white hair faded back to black. The drums stopped. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Luffy looked at the remains of the empty throne. He frowned, kinda uncomfortable anyway. He grabbed one armrest and tore it free. The sound echoed through the chamber. Nami stared. What is he doing now? Zoro sheathed his swords. Destroying the throne. He already destroyed the throne. No, Robin said quietly. He broke it. Luffy kicked the base. A chunk of ancient stone slid across the floor. Frankie watched despite himself as Luffy dismantled the most important piece of furniture in the world with the irritated focus of a man rearranging a bad campsite. One step, one kick, one pull. The empty throne came apart. No grand Haki blast. No divine finishing move, no symbolic speech. He broke it physically, piece by piece. He used one chunk as a footrest, decided it was too tall, and kicked it through a wall. He draped a fallen ceremonial cape over his shoulders because it looked comfortable. He found, after some searching, a cigar in the coat pocket of one unconscious elder who had apparently staggered up the tower too late to matter. Luffy held it up with delight. There it is. Sanji's expression twitched violently. You don't even smoke. Luffy bit the cigar. Maybe I start. You are not starting smoking during the collapse of world government. Luffy looked around at the broken throne room. Seems like a good time. Nami walked toward him. Her steps were slow. The others did not stop her. She stopped a few feet away, tears streaking her face. not clean grief. Not simple sadness, something messier. Anger, fear, exhaustion, hope she hated herself for still having. Is any of him still in there? She asked. Luffy looked at her. The room quieted. Even the rubble seemed to listen. Nami's voice cracked. Any of Luffy at all? He did not answer immediately. That was the cruel mercy. For a long time, he simply stared at her. His face changed, not fully, not enough. But something behind his eyes shifted, like a light seen at the bottom of deep water. He looked at Sanji. Zoro, Usopp, Chopper, Robin, Frankie, Brook, Jinbe, the crew, his crew, Luffy's crew. The cigar hung unlit between his teeth. Finally, he spoke. He thought you were all worth dying for. Nami covered her mouth. Chopper sobbed once. Sanji turned away. Zoro closed his eye. Luffy paused. I think that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. The words cut. Then he looked down at the broken straw hat shadow on the floor, cast by moonlight through the ruined ceiling. His voice dropped. It's also the only thing about this whole trip that I almost understand. No one knew what to say, so no one said anything. Luffy found a spark from somewhere, lit the cigar badly, coughed once, and looked personally betrayed by smoke. Sanji muttered, "Idiot." For half a second it sounded normal. Then the chamber shook, not from battle, from the world catching up. The fall of Mary Geoise could not be hidden. Too many Den Mushi had broadcast pieces. Too many servants had run. Too many guards had seen. Too many nobles had screamed into open channels demanding rescue from people who no longer had orders to give. Across the seas, the news began to move, not through official newspapers. Not through controlled statements, through panic, through rumor, through independent transponder snails, through revolutionary contacts who had waited decades for a message like this and now did not know what to do with it. Through marine channels suddenly full of static and shouted contradictions. Through witnesses who had seen the Holy Land cracked open. Mary Geoise had fallen, not to an army, not to the revolutionary dragon, not to a Yonko fleet, not to ancient weapons, to one man, a pirate with a straw hat, who apparently did it because he wanted to see what would happen. In the ruined throne room, Robin walked slowly to the broken weapons of the founding kings. She knelt, touched one, and closed her eyes. History had not been restored, not yet, but the lock had been smashed. That mattered, even if the hand holding the hammer did not care. Luffy wandered to the shattered edge of the chamber and looked down at Mary Geoise. Fires burned in the distance. People ran, some cried, some laughed, some stood in open plazas staring upward, as if waiting for the gods to put the sky back. He exhaled smoke, made a disgusted face, and tossed the cigar away. Terrible. Sanji pointed at him sharply. Good. Luffy ignored him. He looked at the ruined Holy Land, then at the broken throne, then at the crew. His grin returned. So, he said, what breaks next? No one answered. Far below, in the cracked heart of Mary Geoise, the surviving 5 elders watched the old order burn and understood something worse than defeat. The world had not been conquered. That might have been manageable. The throne had not been claimed. That could have been resisted. The system had not been replaced. That could have been negotiated, infiltrated, poisoned, corrupted, slowly made familiar. No, the throne had been made funny. And once the world learned to laugh at gods, even fear would not fit the same way again. Chapter 5. Everybody's got a bounty. The grand line, without rules the world, did not end when Mary Geoise fell. That was the first disappointment. A lot of people had expected something more dramatic, the sky splitting, the seas boiling, the red line cracking in half. The gods descending from heaven to punish the unwashed masses for daring to notice the smell of smoke. Instead, the sun rose. That felt rude. It rose over the red line like it had appointments elsewhere. It touched the broken towers of Mary Geoise. It shone through shattered domes, across cracked marble, over toppled statues, across the remains of the empty throne that officially did not exist, and now very publicly existed in several pieces. It lit the faces of guards who had no orders. Servants who had no masters standing close enough to strike them. Celestial dragons who had never imagined a morning where screaming louder did not summon obedience. And pirates. The Straw Hat Pirates stood on the edge of the ruined Holy Land and watched the world continue. Nobody spoke for a long time. Below them, Mary Geoise was still moving, not functioning. Moving, that was different. People carried the injured. Guards argued with other guards about whose command still counted. Nobles attempted to order servants back into formation, only to discover that terror had changed direction overnight. Some servants still obeyed from habit, others did not move. A few simply walked away, slowly at first, then faster when no lightning came from the sky to correct them. The celestial dragons were the loudest, they had always been loud. But now their voices sounded thinner. A man in a cracked bubble helmet stood in the middle of a marble avenue, waving a jeweled cane at a group of soldiers. "Arrest the pirate, arrest all of them. Why are you standing there?" "I command you." The soldiers did not move, not because they had become brave, because their chain of command had turned into smoke, rubble, and a very complicated emotional problem. The celestial dragon's face reddened. "Do you know who I am?" One soldier looked up at the ruined tower where the empty throne had broken, then back at the noble. "No," he said quietly. "I don't think I do anymore." The noble stared. The soldier looked terrified after saying it, but he had said it. That was how the new world began, not with a speech. With a frightened man realizing the sky had not punished him for refusing. Luffy sat on a broken wall above the avenue, chewing on something that might have been breakfast or architectural decoration. It was hard to tell. His straw hat sat low. The stolen ceremonial cape was gone, probably abandoned the second it became less funny. He watched the scene below with interest. "Everybody's confused," he said. Nami stood several feet away, arms wrapped around herself. "You destroyed the center of the world," Luffy nodded. "That'll do it." That is not a normal answer. Normal got boring. Sanji leaned against a cracked pillar, cigarette unlit between his fingers. He had not smoked it. He had been holding it for 10 minutes, too angry to remember fire. "You don't get to act casual about this." Luffy looked at him. "Sure I do." Sanji's leg twitched. Zoro stood between them before anyone asked him to. Not blocking Sanji exactly. Just standing where violence would have to pass through him first. That had become their new pattern. Someone almost snapped. Zoro became a door. No one thanked him for it. Frankie had gone quiet again. He was staring down toward the lower ports, where, somewhere far below, the thousand Sunny might still be waiting or drifting or stolen or damaged or worse. Every part of him wanted to go back. Every part of him knew leaving now meant losing the last chance to understand what their captain had become. Robin stood beside him. "He left it afloat," she said softly. Frankie did not look at her. "That's supposed to make me feel better." "No, good, because it doesn't." Robin lowered her eyes. "He could have destroyed it." Frankie's jaw clenched. That was the wound inside the wound. Luffy had abandoned the Sunny, but he had not harmed her. The difference was small. It was also the size of all their remaining hope. Chopper sat on a chunk of marble with his medical bag in his lap, treating anyone who came close enough to help. Guard, servant, noble, pirate, it did not matter. His small hooves moved quickly, professionally. Tears still clung to his fur, but his work did not slow. Usopp hovered near him, occasionally handing supplies, occasionally scanning the sky for incoming doom, occasionally muttering to himself. "Okay, so Mary Geoise fell. That's fine. That's a thing that happens. Government collapses, gods humiliated, secret king punched through furniture." Perfectly normal pirate week. Brook stood beside a broken statue, looking at its empty marble face. "Yo-ho-ho," he said quietly. "I have seen skeletons with more life than this place." Jinbe watched the servants leaving. That was where his attention remained, not on the broken towers. Not on the defeated guards, on the people who kept looking over their shoulders as they walked away from chains they had worn too long to trust freedom. His face was heavy. "This victory will not feel clean," he said. Robin looked at him. "No, but it will matter." She nodded slowly. "Yes." That was the contradiction of Mary Geoise. The hand that broke the chains did not care about the hands that had worn them, but the chains were broken anyway. And history, cruel as it was, had always been full of ugly tools doing useful damage. The first news reached Sabayati Archipelago before noon. It came through a den mushy in a bar where pirates, brokers, gamblers, thieves, and people pretending not to be all four were arguing about whether the smoke rising from the red line meant a fire, an invasion, or a celestial dragon birthday party gone wrong. The snail's eyes bulged. Its mouth opened, a voice screamed through static. Mary Geoise has fallen. Everyone went quiet. The bartender slowly lowered a glass. A pirate with 3 knives in his belt laughed. Yeah, and I'm Joy Boy's grandmother. The voice continued, frantic. The Holy Guard is broken. The 5 elders are defeated. The celestial dragons are fleeing. The empty throne, the signal cut. The bar remained silent. Then every den mushy in the room began ringing at once. That was when laughter died. Within an hour, Sabayati became a storm. Slave traders tried to vanish. Former slaves began running. Marines attempted to establish order with no idea whose order they represented. Pirates ran toward ships, not because they knew where to go, but because standing still felt like volunteering for history. At Grove 13, Shaki listened to 3 separate reports, lit a cigarette, and looked toward the red line. Well, she said, that boy always did know how to make an entrance. Rayleigh said nothing for a long time. His glass sat untouched. Finally, he smiled. It was not a happy smile. No, he said. This isn't the boy I met. Shaki glanced at him. Rayleigh looked toward the distant line of red stone, but it's wearing his hat. The Revolutionary Army received the news in fragments that made it worse. Dragons stood in a war room where maps covered every wall and listened as messengers shouted over one another. Holy Land breached. Multiple celestial dragon estates compromised. 5 elders missing or incapacitated. Unconfirmed reports of Emu. The room went silent at the name. Several revolutionaries looked around as if the word itself might summon a blade. Sabo stepped forward, face pale and burning at once. Say that again, the messenger swallowed. Unconfirmed reports. The hidden ruler was confronted. Dragon's eyes darkened. He had spent years building toward a war. Not a raid, not revenge. War, a long, organized, coordinated dismantling of the world government structure. The revolution had cells hidden in kingdoms, contacts in ports, sympathizers in factories, spies inside military supply chains. It had plans for food distribution, prisoner liberation, political transition, emergency treaties, communication networks, and the 1,000 unglamorous details that separated freedom from collapse. Now the center had fallen in one night, not to them, not to the people, not to justice, to Monkey D. Luffy or something wearing him. Ivankov's voice was unusually low. Dragon boy. Dragon looked at the map. Mary Geoise sat at the center like a pin through the world. For decades, it had been the mountain they planned to climb. Now someone had kicked the top off and walked away laughing. This is not victory, Dragon said. Sabo's fists clenched. It's something. Yes, Dragon turned to his commanders. And if we are not careful, something becomes nothing very quickly. Across the seas, Marines received the news through official channels that were no longer official enough. At Marineford's rebuilt command center, officers shouted contradictory orders. Some insisted the fleet admiral must immediately declare emergency martial authority. Others argued that without the 5 elders, no chain of command above the Marines remained. A few quietly asked whether that was a bad thing, then stopped speaking when senior officers looked their way. Admiral Fujitora listened in silence. His blindness had spared him the sight of many ugly things. It had never spared him understanding. A young officer approached, trembling. Admiral, what should we do? Fujitora's hand rested on his sword cane. What orders have we received? None that make sense, sir. Then perhaps, Fujitora said, we should begin by doing what makes sense. The officer blinked. Sir, protect civilians, prevent looting. Stop those who use this chaos to harm the weak. But whose authority? Fujitora turned his face toward him. The officer stopped. Justice that cannot stand without permission from tyrants was never justice, Fujitora said. Elsewhere, Akenu heard the same news and crushed a desk with one hand. Unacceptable. No one in the room argued. That was wise. The fleet admiral stood surrounded by reports, each worse than the last. Mary Geoise compromised. Holy Guard shattered. Celestial dragons demanding evacuation. Gorosei unreachable. Imu unconfirmed. World nobles panicking. Pirates mobilizing. Revolutionary cells activating. And at the center of every report, Straw Hat Luffy. Akanu's face hardened into volcanic fury. He did not care what shape the world had taken. Piracy was piracy. Chaos was chaos. If the world no longer had a head, then justice would become the spine. Prepare the fleet, he said. A vice admiral hesitated. Against whom, sir? Akenu looked at him. The room became very quiet. Everyone. In the New World, the remaining emperors felt the pressure shift. Power is not only strength, power is relationship. A Yonko is a Yonko because the world agrees the title means something. Marines measure against it. Pirates fear it. Territories rely on it. Rivals challenge it. Newspapers inflate it. The world government balances it. Remove the balance, and the title remains impressive but strangely lighter. Like a crown in a room where no one knows who still believes in kings. Shanks heard the news on a quiet island where his crew had stopped for supplies. No one drank after the report. That was how everyone knew it was serious. Lucky Roo held a piece of meat halfway to his mouth and forgot to bite. Yasopp stared toward the sea. Beckman exhaled smoke and looked at his captain. Shanks sat on a rock near the shore, the wind moving through his red hair. The report repeated from a den mushy at his feet. Mary Geoise fallen, 5 elders defeated, empty throne destroyed. Straw Hat Luffy responsible. Shanks closed his eyes. He remembered a boy in a village, a grin full of sunlight, a small hand holding a straw hat too big for his head, a promise. Luffy, he said softly. Beckman stepped closer. You think it's really him? Shanks opened his eyes. The sea looked the same. That offended him too. No. The crew said nothing. Shanks picked up the den mushy receiver, find his route. Beckman's brow lifted. Planning to stop him, Shanks looked toward the horizon. I'm planning to talk. Lucky Roo finally lowered the meat. And if talking fails, Shanks smiled without humor. Then we learn whether the world still has worse jokes left. Meanwhile, on an island that had once paid tribute to a celestial dragon family, people gathered in the central square around a newspaper that had been printed too quickly, with too many spelling errors and not nearly enough verified information. The headline read, Holy Land Falls, Straw Hat Pirate declares war on gods. Someone had written underneath in charcoal, did he, though no one knew. That uncertainty spread faster than the news itself. Had Straw Hat Luffy freed the world? Had he doomed it? Was the world government gone? Were the Marines still legitimate? Were taxes still due? Could kings still claim divine authority? Were celestial dragons still untouchable? Could slaves run? Could guards refuse? Could pirates claim islands? Could anyone stop anyone now? By evening, the world had produced 12 new rebellions, 9 false straw hat sightings, 4 emergency councils, 3 religious movements, 2 attempted kingdoms of new Mary Geoise, and 1 restaurant chain offering a limited-time God-killer meat platter. Before being shut down by local authorities, who were unsure whether blasphemy laws still applied, back in the actual ruins of Mary Geoise, Luffy found this hilarious. He had stolen a stack of early newspapers and spread them across the deck of the regrettable goat, which had somehow survived docking at the Holy Land despite looking like it should have lost an argument with a stiff breeze. The Straw Hats had returned to it because there was nowhere else to go immediately. That was not the same as acceptance. Luffy sat cross-legged on the deck, reading headlines. Listen to this one, he said. Straw Hat Demon devours throne. I didn't devour it. Brook tilted his head. You did chew part of the armrest. It looked like chocolate. It was ancient wood. Bad chocolate. Sanji stood at the galley door. Stop eating historical artifacts. Luffy flipped to another paper. World savior or world-ending menace, that one's lazy. Usopp, who had not slept, pointed at him. You are critiquing journalism after collapsing civilization. Somebody should. Nami snatched one paper from the pile. Do you understand what's happening? Lots of people yelling. The entire world is panicking. Yeah, countries are going to fight. Pirates are going to move. Marines might attack everyone. The Revolutionary Army is probably scrambling. Former slaves need safe passage. Islands protected by the old government are exposed. Islands oppressed by it are rebelling. Every map I own is politically useless now. Luffy stared at her. Then smiled faintly. You like maps. Nami stopped. The words were so simple, so Luffy. For 1 second, all her anger jammed inside her chest. Then he added, guess you get to make new ones. She looked away. I hate you. Luffy's smile did not change. Maybe. That was another thing he did now. He accepted emotional damage like weather. The crew gathered later that night below deck, away from him. Their first meeting without Luffy. No one called it that. No one had to. They sat around a scarred table that smelled faintly of old rum and regret. The lantern above them swung with the ship. Outside, Luffy could be heard humming tunelessly to himself and occasionally laughing at a newspaper. Sanji broke first. "We can't keep doing this." Usopp pointed at him. "Thank you, finally. Someone said it." Zoro sat against the wall, arms crossed. "Doing what?" "Following him like nothing's wrong. No one thinks nothing's wrong." Sanji slammed a hand on the table. "Then say what you think." The room went quiet. Chopper looked down at his hooves. Frankie's voice was rough. "I think our captain left our ship." Nobody spoke. The ship creaked. Frankie swallowed. "I think I built the Sunny for a man who loved freedom. And today I watched someone with his face trade her like junk because another ship smelled worse." Nami's eyes softened. "Frankie," he shook his head. "No, let me say it. I need to say it or I'm going to break something I can't fix." Robin's voice was gentle. "Go on." Frankie stared at the table. "I also think he didn't sink her, and I don't know what to do with that." That was the room, that one sentence. Everything they knew and everything they feared, tied together in a knot. Sanji leaned back, jaw tight. Chopper wiped his eyes. He stood in front of Robin when Amu talked about erasing history. Robin's gaze lowered. "He may not have noticed," she said, "but he did it." Chopper insisted. "Yes." Usopp wrapped his arms around himself. "Great. So he's a terrifying, immortal maniac with muscle memory for friendship." Brook raised a finger. "Yo-ho-ho, that is a deeply unpleasant but accurate sentence." Nami looked at Zoro. "You've been quiet." Zoro opened his eye. "I'm thinking. That's rare. Oi." Despite everything, the smallest ghost of normality passed through the room, then it vanished. Zoro looked toward the ceiling, where Luffy's muffled laughter could be heard. "I challenged him." Sanji's expression shifted. "You almost did." "No, I did." He understood it. Nami frowned. And he didn't care enough to answer. That landed. Zoro's voice remained steady, but there was something beneath it. A swordsman could accept defeat. He could accept death. He could accept following a captain into impossible odds because that captain's dream made the impossible worth cutting. But being ignored, being recognized and dismissed, that was a deeper kind of insult. "What does that mean?" Jinbe asked. Zoro was silent for a moment. "It means if we fight him now, we lose. Not just because he's stronger, because we don't know what we're fighting for." Sanji's eyes narrowed. "We fight for Luffy." "Which one?" Sanji stood so fast the chair scraped backward. Zoro did not move. The room held its breath. Then Sanji slowly sat down. He hated that Zoro had a point. Robin folded her hands. "There may not be a clean answer. He is not fully gone. But he is not fully present either." Usopp laughed bitterly. "That's comforting." "It was not meant to be." Nami rubbed her forehead. "So what do we do?" No one answered immediately. That was new too. Usually someone would shout. Luffy would declare a direction. The crew would complain, then follow, because his certainty was gravity. Without that warmth, decisions became heavy. Jinbe finally spoke. "We remain for now." Sanji looked at him sharply. Jinbe continued. "Not because this is acceptable, not because we forgive what has happened, but because the world has changed, and wherever he goes, the change will follow. If we leave, we lose any chance to protect those caught near him." Robin nodded. "And any chance to understand the remnants of Luffy still present." Chopper whispered, "We can still help him." Nobody corrected him. Nobody agreed either. Nami leaned back. "For now," she said. The words passed around the table, not loyalty, not surrender, a delay, the most straw hat decision possible. They would decide later. Above deck, Luffy stopped humming. For a second, the crew wondered if he had heard them. Then his voice drifted down. "Hey, who wants to hunt an emperor?" Everyone closed their eyes. Usopp whispered, "I hate later." By morning, Luffy had made a list. This was troubling for several reasons. First, Luffy making a list was already unnatural. Second, the list was written on the back of a celestial dragon lineage document. Third, none of the names had explanations. Nami found him pinning it to the cabin wall with a decorative knife. She stared. "What is that?" "Things to do." "You don't make lists." "I do now." She stepped closer. The list read, Shanks, Akainu Lava Man, Blackbeard Weird Body Guy Buggy, Dragon, Maybe Boring Giant Elephant Moon. Whoever printed bad headline. Nami stared at the last entry. "You are not hunting a newspaper editor. He knows what he did." Sanji walked up behind her and read the list. His expression darkened at Akainu's name. Zoro noticed Shanks. Robin noticed Dragon. Usopp noticed Moon. "Why is the moon on there?" Luffy shrugged. "Looks smug." Frankie stared at the list, then at him. "You know what this is, a list. It's a disaster menu." "Good name." Nami grabbed the paper. Luffy let her. That surprised her enough to stop. He looked at her with mild interest. You got better targets. Nami's anger rose, then tangled with practicality. That was the trap, because yes, she did. There were slave ports still operating, marine bases likely to turn brutal without oversight. Pirate crews preparing to attack unprotected islands. Celestial dragon escape convoys carrying wealth, hostages, and secrets. If Luffy was going to be a living natural disaster, someone needed to aim the storm away from civilians. She hated that thought. She hated more that it was true. Robin saw the calculation cross her face. So, Robin said softly, we become navigators in another sense. Nami glared. Don't make it poetic, Luffy grinned. Storm map. No. Chaos chart. No. Punch compass. Sanji pinched the bridge of his nose. I hate that one works. By noon, the first bounty poster appeared. No one knew who printed it. That was part of the charm. It had not come from the world government. There was no functioning world government office willing to admit responsibility for anything. It had not come from the Marines, who were still arguing internally about whether a bounty required authorization from people who might be buried under a throne. It seemed to have been produced by a coalition of terrified royals, surviving officials, private security brokers, and at least one newspaper printer with a sense of humor and very poor survival instincts. The poster reached their ship tied to an arrow. The arrow landed in the mast beside Usopp's head. Usopp stared at it, then at the distant shore, then back at the arrow. Okay, he said. I respect the shot, but emotionally, uncalled for. Luffy pulled the poster free. His face looked back at him, not the familiar smiling bounty photo. This one had been sketched from witness descriptions. The artist had captured the straw hat, the grin, and the eyes badly enough to make the whole thing more disturbing. The bounty number beneath was so large Nami stared at it for 30 full seconds before speaking. This number is fake. Luffy looked. Is it high? It's not high, it's fictional. Frankie leaned over. They don't have that much money. Robin, read the fine print. Payment guaranteed by the Emergency Stabilization Council of Allied Sovereign Interests. Usopp blinked. That sounds fake too. It likely is. At the bottom of the poster, in bold letters, someone had added, approach with absolutely no expectations of survival. Luffy stared, then slowly smiled. He carried the poster into his cabin and pinned it beside his list. Nami followed, horrified. You are decorating. It's my first one. You've had bounties before. This one gets me. Usopp peered through the doorway. That is a sentence no emotionally stable person says about a death warrant. Luffy stepped back to admire it. The poster hung crooked. He nodded, satisfied. Outside, bells began ringing from the harbor below. Not alarm bells this time. Departure bells. Ships were leaving merry GOIs in every direction. Evacuation vessels, stolen noble yachts, marine transports, revolutionary boats, pirate raiders, servant-packed barges, anything that floated and had not been set on fire or declared sacred. The world was scattering. Luffy walked to the rail and watched. The straw hats gathered behind him. For once, he did not make a joke. Below, a group of former slaves pushed a small boat into the water. A guard shouted after them, then stopped when one of his own comrades put a hand on his shoulder and shook his head. The boat drifted free. Chopper smiled through tears. Robin closed her eyes. Sanji lit his cigarette at last. Nami watched the boat until it disappeared behind another vessel. Luffy's hand moved without thought. He reached up and touched the brim of his straw hat. No one commented. The moment was too fragile. Then he lowered his hand and grinned at the horizon. So, he said, who's closest? Nami sighed. She pulled out a new blank map, not because she approved. Because someone had to keep the storm from hitting the wrong islands. The closest major threat is a celestial dragon convoy trying to escape with hostages and treasure. Luffy's grin widened. Hostages are boring. Saving them isn't. He glanced at her. Something flickered. Then he shrugged. Fine, we break the convoy. Sanji looked at Nami. Nami did not look proud. She looked tired, but the ship turned. The regrettable goat creaked toward the open sea, carrying a crew that no longer knew whether they were pirates, witnesses, caretakers, jailers, or the last thin rope tied to something inside their captain that had not completely vanished. Behind them, merry GOIs smoked. Ahead, the Grand Line waited without rules. and in the cabin, beneath a crooked bounty poster no one could ever pay, Luffy's new list fluttered in the wind. The world had lost its gods. It had gained a punchline. Nobody was sure which was worse. Chapter 6. The adventure was the fragging we did along the way. Sunset on a burning world. The world kept changing after Mary Geoise fell. That was the part nobody knew how to handle. People expected history to have clean edges. A king died, a new king rose. A war ended, treaties were signed. A tyrant fell, bells rang, speeches were made, flags changed, and everyone pretended the hard part was over. But the fall of Mary Geoise had not been a revolution. It had been an interruption. The throne was not taken. The world government was not replaced. No grand council sat down with ink and parchment to write the rules of the new age. The revolutionary army rushed to stabilize islands before pirate crews could swallow them. The Marines split into factions without publicly admitting they had split into factions. Kings who had hidden behind world government protection suddenly remembered the importance of local popularity. Former slaves ran until their legs failed, then got up and ran again because freedom felt unreal unless it was moving. And somewhere in the middle of all that, a stolen, ugly pirate ship cut through the Grand Line like a bad decision with sails. The regrettable goat had survived longer than anyone expected. This annoyed Frankie. "It's not natural," he muttered one morning, glaring at the mast. The ship groaned. Frankie pointed at it. "Don't talk back to me." Usopp, sitting nearby with a half-repaired slingshot, looked up. "Are you arguing with the ship?" "I'm judging the ship. That feels worse. It deserves worse." The goat creaked again. Frankie's eye twitched. "I heard that." For the first time in days, Usopp laughed. Not much, just a little. But it was enough that Chopper, who had been sorting bandages by size, looked up with wide eyes like he had found a rare animal. The crew had become careful with laughter. Not because laughter was gone, because it had changed shape. Before, laughter had been easy. Luffy made something ridiculous. Usopp screamed. Nami hit someone. Sanji insulted Zoro. Zoro got lost on a straight line, and the world felt survivable because their captain's joy was large enough to drag everyone behind it. Now, laughter arrived in pieces. A bad joke from Brook. Usopp panicking with excellent grammar. Frankie insulting their stolen ship like it was a rival shipwright. Chopper accidentally treating a barrel because he was tired and it had looked injured. The pieces mattered. The straw hats collected them quietly. Luffy, or Lobo Luffy, though no one said that name aloud, spent less time with them. Not dramatically. He did not announce distance. He did not brood. He did not avoid the crew in any way that could be confronted. He simply drifted. Sometimes he sat on the figurehead of the goat, which was not a lion and did not deserve him. Sometimes he vanished for hours and returned with stolen food, strange weapons, 3 new newspapers, or once, a live goat. The goat had lasted 12 minutes before biting Sanji's shoe and being promoted by Luffy to first mate of the ship. Zoro had looked offended. Sanji had tried to cook it. Chopper had defended it. Nami had charged Luffy a livestock chaos fee. For exactly 2 minutes, the ship felt almost normal. Then Luffy had looked at the goat and said, "You're funnier than the throne." And the silence returned. That was how it went now, moments of warmth followed by reminders that the warmth had no roots. The crew stayed anyway. They told themselves it was temporary. They told themselves they were preventing greater disasters. They told themselves there were still flickers. And there were. That was the cruelest part. Luffy still stood between danger and the crew without thinking. During the Celestial Dragon convoy incident, he had ignored cannon fire, treasure, and 3 government agents to grab Chopper by the back of the coat before a falling mast could crush him. When Chopper looked up, trembling, Luffy had seemed confused by his own hand. "Tiny Doctor almost got flattened," he said. Chopper had cried for 20 minutes. Luffy had wandered off to see if the convoy had snacks. Another time, Nami had fallen asleep over a map during a storm. Luffy had walked past, stopped, and placed his straw hat over her face to block the lantern light. He had no memory of doing it the next morning. Nami did. That was the problem. If he had been entirely gone, grief might have been cleaner. Instead, Luffy remained like handwriting under black paint, visible only when the light hit wrong. 2 weeks after Mary Geoise, the crew held another meeting without him. This time, nobody pretended it was anything else. They gathered below deck while Luffy sat on the rail above, flicking pebbles at seagulls and missing on purpose because hitting them had become boring after the first day. Nami spread several maps across the table. The old political borders had been crossed out, corrected, circled, and angrily rewritten so many times the paper looked wounded. "The Grand Line is stabilizing in some places," she said. "Not all. Some kingdoms are forming emergency councils. The Revolutionary Army is stepping into former government strongholds. Marines under Fujitora are protecting civilian routes. Marines under Akainu are declaring anyone outside Marine control a threat." Usopp raised a hand. "So bad, complicated bad, worse kind." Robin nodded. The fall of a central authority rarely produces instant freedom. It produces opportunity. For everyone. Sanji leaned back, cigarette unlit as usual. "Including monsters, especially monsters," Jinbe said. Zoro sat in the corner, arms crossed. "Then we cut the monsters." Nami looked at him. "Which ones?" He said nothing. That was the issue. There were too many targets now. Slavers without government protection were easier to crush, but pirate crews had begun taking their place. Former nobles were hiring mercenaries. Some island kings declared independence from the world government, then immediately became worse than before because no one was watching them. Several marine bases refused to recognize new authority and were acting as private armies. And every time the Straw Hats approached one crisis, another erupted 3 islands away. Luffy solved problems quickly, too quickly. A pirate fleet attacking refugees. Gone. A noble convoy carrying chained prisoners. Broken. A marine commander using emergency law to seize food from civilians. Launched through his own courthouse. The results were often helpful. The method was never comforting. Chopper looked around the table. "Are we still helping people?" The question was small. No one dismissed it. Sanji answered first. "Yes." Nami nodded. "Yes." Robin's voice was quiet. "But we are not controlling what we have become." Frankie rubbed his face. "We're following a natural disaster and putting warning signs around it." Brook raised a finger. "Yo-ho-ho. A noble occupation, if emotionally exhausting." Usopp looked toward the ceiling. "How long do we keep doing that?" There it was, the question they had avoided. The ship creaked. Above deck, Luffy laughed at something only he found funny. Nami folded her hands over the map. "We have dreams," she said. Nobody spoke. She continued, softer. "I wanted to map the world. Sanji wants the all-blue. Zoro wants to become the greatest swordsman. Robin wants the true history. Frankie built a ship to sail to the end of the sea. Brook made a promise. Chopper wants to cure anything. Jinbe smiled faintly. Peace worth the name." Usopp looked down. "I wanted to become a brave warrior of the sea." "You are," Chopper said immediately. Usopp tried to smile. "Brave warriors usually know what they're doing." Zoro snorted. "No, they don't. That helped more than it should have." Nami looked at the maps again. "Our dreams are still there. Maybe easier now, maybe harder. But every day we follow him, we become part of whatever story the world tells about him." Robin's eyes lowered. "And if we leave, we may lose the last trace of Luffy still visible." Sanji's jaw tightened. "I hate this." "Me too," Nami said. They sat with that. No dramatic answer, no vote. No captain bursting in and declaring the direction. In the end, they made the most straw hat decision possible. They decided to decide later, again. This time, nobody laughed. Above deck, Luffy stopped flicking pebbles. For just a moment, he looked down at the boards beneath his feet. His hearing was better than he let on. His memories were full of voices around a table. Arguments, dreams, laughter. A rubber boy shouting that of course they would go forward, because where else was adventure? Lobo's boredom rolled over it. But slower this time, not stopped, not beaten. Just slower. Luffy stood and looked toward the horizon. Something was coming. A small boat appeared near sunset. That alone was strange. The New World did not respect small boats. The sea ate them. Weather broke them. Sea kings mistook them for snacks. Pirates stole them. Marines searched them. Only idiots, legends, or men with no need to prove anything crossed dangerous waters alone. The boat approached without hurry. One man sat in it. Red hair, black cloak, one arm. The ship went silent before anyone announced him, Shanks. He tied his small boat to the goat himself and climbed aboard like he was visiting an old friend's dock, not stepping onto a ship carrying the man who had just shattered the world order. No one moved to stop him. Zoro stood. Sanji straightened. Nami's breath caught. Usopp went pale in a complicated, personal way. Luffy sat on the rail, one knee raised, straw hat tipped back. For once, he did not grin immediately. Shanks looked at him. The air between them filled with things no one else could touch. A village bar, a stolen fruit, a sea monster, a lost arm. A straw hat placed on a crying boy's head, a promise to return it. Shanks' eyes moved to the hat, then to Luffy's face. "You've grown," he said. Luffy considered that. Technically. Sanji closed his eyes. Shanks smiled faintly. It hurt to see. "Can we talk?" Luffy hopped down from the rail. "You here to fight?" "No, smart." Zoro's hand twitched. Shanks did not look away from Luffy. "I'm here to talk." Luffy studied him, then shrugged. "Fine." They left the ship together, not far. A small rocky island sat nearby, barely more than a curve of stone rising from the sea with scrub grass and a few stubborn trees. The crew watched from the goat as Shanks and Luffy sat across from each other near the waterline. No one followed. Even Luffy seemed to understand this conversation needed space. That alone made Nami's chest hurt. Shanks sat with one knee raised, looking out at the sea. Luffy sat opposite him, picking at a loose thread on his vest. For a while, neither spoke. Then Shanks said, "You remember Fuchsia Village?" Luffy's fingers paused. "Yeah, Makino, bar lady, woof slap, loud old guy." Shanks looked at him. "Me?" Luffy glanced up. "Red-haired idiot who lost an arm and gave me a hat." Shanks' smile was small. "That's one version. The accurate version, maybe." The wind moved across the rocks. Shanks took a bottle from his cloak and set it between them. Luffy looked at it. Poison. Rum. Worse. Shanks laughed softly for a second. The sound belonged to an older world. He took a drink, then set the bottle down. "I heard what happened at Mary Geoi's." "Everybody did." "Yes. You mad?" Shanks looked toward the sea. "No." Luffy tilted his head, disappointed. "Not exactly." Scared. Shanks was quiet. Then he nodded. "Yes." Luffy smiled. "At least that's honest." "I'm not scared of strength," Shanks said. "The sea is full of strong people. I'm not scared of chaos either. Pirates live in it." "What then?" Shanks looked at him. "I'm scared because you don't want anything." Luffy blinked. Shanks continued. "Kaido wanted war. Big Mom wanted family, twisted as that was. Blackbeard wants everything he can grab. The world government wanted control. Even Amu wanted history to stay buried. Dangerous people can be understood through desire." He leaned forward. "You don't want to rule. You don't want revenge. You don't want treasure. You don't even want to be pirate king." Luffy looked away. The words hit something, not deeply, but somewhere. "I wanted that once," he said. Shanks' voice softened. "Yes, feels stupid now. It was always stupid." Luffy looked back at him. Shanks smiled. That was the point. For the first time, Luffy did not have an answer. Shanks looked toward the horizon. "My captain was stupid too, the best kind." Roger laughed at things other men worshipped. He chased the end of the world because it was there. He knew he was dying and still made the sea feel young. Luffy picked up a stone and rolled it between his fingers. Sounds like the kind of guy who would have been fun to kill. The crew, watching from the ship, could not hear the words, but they saw Shanks close his eyes. For several seconds he said nothing, then he opened them. "He was the kind of guy who would have been fun to know," Shanks said. "Which is different." Luffy stared at him. The stone cracked in his hand. The silence stretched. "Yeah," Luffy said eventually. His voice was lower now. "I guess it is." Shanks watched him carefully. "There he is." Luffy's eyes sharpened. "Don't." Shanks did not flinch. "Don't what?" "Look for him like he's hiding under a table." "I'm not." "Yes, you are," Shanks sighed. "Maybe." Luffy stood abruptly. The moment broke. He looked irritated, but not the playful kind. Something rower. Less Lobo. More human. That made it more dangerous. "You came all this way to tell me I'm not fun." "I came to see if you were still Luffy." And Shanks stood too. The wind moved between them. "I don't know." Luffy's grin returned, but it was strained. "That's the smartest thing anyone's said lately." Shanks placed a hand near his sword, not drawing, just acknowledging it existed. "I also came to tell you something." Luffy raised an eyebrow. "The road to Laugh Tale is open now." The air changed, even from the ship. Robin felt it. Her head turned. Nami's eyes widened. "What did he say?" Robin did not answer. She did not need to. The final island, the end of the Grand Line. The place where all roads, all poneglyphs, all buried history pointed. The one piece. Luffy stared at Shanks. The old dream stirred not as fire, as an echo. Pirate king, adventure, freedom, a promise beneath a straw hat. Then Lobo's amusement leaned over it. Okay, Luffy said. Shanks frowned slightly. Okay, sounds like something to do. He turned toward the goat. Shanks' face tightened. Luffy, he stopped. Shanks' voice carried more weight now. If you find it and don't care, it will hurt everyone who spent their life believing it mattered. Luffy looked back. And if I don't find it, then maybe someone who cares will. Luffy considered that. For one brief, strange moment, the choice hung there. He could leave it. He could turn away. He could let history's final answer wait for someone with a heart still shaped to hold it. Then he grinned. Should have hidden it better. Shanks lowered his head, not in defeat, in mourning. When Luffy returned to the ship, no one asked what had been said. Robin already knew enough. Nami saw it on her face. We're going to Laugh Tale, Nami said. Luffy walked past them toward the figurehead. Yep. Usopp's mouth opened and closed, just like that, just like that. Robin's hands trembled. Frankie looked up. Brook went still. Jin closed his eyes. Zoro watched Luffy carefully. Sanji whispered, damn it. Because this should have been the dream, the great final turn, the last voyage. The moment when the crew leaned forward into destiny, laughing, crying, shouting, ready to reach the end of the world together. Instead, it felt like following a stranger into their own memories. They went anyway, of course they did. The journey to Laugh Tale did not feel like legend. That was perhaps the cruelest joke. The seas were still dangerous. The weather still tried to kill them. Strange currents still dragged ships sideways into impossible fog. Sea kings still moved beneath the waves like living islands. Ancient routes still demanded skill, courage, and knowledge. But the world had been cracked open. Obstacles that might once have required alliances, sacrifices, battles, and revelations now bent under the pressure of Luffy's impossible existence. A storm swallowed them. Luffy punched a hole through the cloud wall because he wanted sunlight. A sea king rose. He stared at it until it decided to be somewhere else. A rival crew attempted to intercept them near an unmarked current, claiming the Straw Hats' bounty would buy them the new world. Luffy listened to their speech, then asked Nami if they had time. Nami said no. He launched them into the horizon without leaving the deck. The crew hated how useful he was. Robin guided them through the final interpretation of the poneglyphs. Her voice did not shake when she read. That took effort. Every carved line mattered. Every ancient word carried weight she had chased since childhood. O'Hara's ghost stood behind her. Clover, her mother, the scholars, the burning tree of knowledge, Saul's laugh, the loneliness of years spent hunted for wanting the truth, and Luffy listened, not with Luffy's bright impatience. Not bouncing, not shouting, not asking if the ancient kingdom had meat. He listened because the information led somewhere interesting. Robin did not know whether to be grateful or devastated. When the final current opened, even the sea seemed to understand. The water changed color under the setting sun. The air became strangely clear. The log pose spun uselessly, then stopped, all needles pointing nowhere and everywhere. The Grand Line's madness quieted around them like an audience before a curtain rose. Laugh Tale appeared at dawn. It was not enormous. That surprised Usopp. I expected more skulls, he whispered. Brook tilted his head. I expected more laughter. The island sat calm beneath a wide sky, green and gold and impossibly lonely. Ruins rose among trees, not dead ruins, waiting ruins. Stone steps climbed toward a central place where history had been left like a letter no one had opened for 800 years. The Straw Hats disembarked in silence. Every step felt wrong without the old Luffy running ahead. He did walk first, but not running. Hands in pockets, head tilted, bored curiosity in his stride. Robin followed close behind, face pale. The others spread out behind her. Nami held her maps tightly. Zoro's hand rested on his swords, though there was nothing to cut. Sanji had no cigarette. Chopper walked beside Usopp. Frankie's eyes were wet, and he did not hide it. Brook hummed no song. Jinbe carried the quiet dignity of someone walking into the grave of an age. At the heart of Laugh Tale, they found it. The truth. Not a pile of gold, though there was treasure enough to drown kingdoms. Not a weapon, though knowledge of weapons slept there. Not a simple answer. It was a story, a ridiculous, impossible, heartbreaking story. The void century, Joy Boy, the ancient kingdom, the promise broken, the world split and shaped by fear. The joke Roger had laughed at because it was too enormous, too tragic, too absurd to meet with anything else. Robin read and read and read. At some point she began crying. No one interrupted her. The truth filled the morning and stretched into afternoon. The crew listened, each hearing a different ending to the lives they had lived. Nami heard the world's geography as theft. Sanji heard seas divided by power and imagined all blue not as myth, but wound. Frankie heard the work of builders who had made wonders and monsters. Brook heard the song of promises waiting too long. Jinb heard the weight of old hatred and the cost of inherited chains. Chopper heard how many lives had been shaped by lies called natural order. Usopp heard a story so impossible even he would have been afraid to invent it. Zoro heard nothing mystical. He heard a challenge, and Luffy sat on a broken stone, chin in one hand, listening. When Robin finished, the island was quiet. The sea moved gently below. The greatest secret in the world lay open. The One Piece, whatever else it was, had become known to them. The old Luffy would have laughed, maybe cried, maybe shouted that of course they were going to turn the world upside down, maybe demanded meat, maybe all of it at once. This Luffy looked at the truth of 800 years, took his time, then said, "Huh, that was all." The words struck Robin like a slap. Sanji turned away. Nami closed her eyes. Usopp looked like he might be sick. Even Zoro's face hardened. Luffy stood. He brushed dust from his shorts. "Pretty good joke," he said. Robin's voice was quiet. "Is that all it is to you?" He looked at her. The question hung between them. For once, his answer did not come quickly. "No," he said. The crew froze. He looked back at the carved history. "I mean, yeah, mostly." Robin's expression fell, then Luffy added, almost reluctantly, "But somebody cared a lot when they wrote it. That was not enough." It was also more than they had expected. Robin looked at him for a long time, then nodded once, not forgiveness, acknowledgement. Luffy turned toward the shore. Nami stepped forward. "You're not going to tell the world about what?" She stared at him. "Everything. Too much talking, Luffy." He stopped at the sound of his name. Nami's voice shook. "People died for this. People waited for this. Robin lived her whole life for this." Luffy looked at Robin, then at the ruins, then at the sea. "You tell them." Robin inhaled softly. He shrugged. "You care." Nobody spoke. Luffy walked away. The crew remained among the ruins of Laugh-Tale, surrounded by the answer to the world. For the first time since Mary Geoise, they did not follow immediately. Luffy reached the shore alone. He stood at the water's edge and looked at the goat. Ugly ship, bad ship, funny ship. Beyond it, the Grand Line stretched in all directions, cracked and burning and healing and becoming something no map could hold yet. Behind him, footsteps approached. Zoro, of course. The swordsman stopped a few feet away. "You leaving?" Luffy did not look back. "Maybe. Without us. Maybe." Zoro's hand rested on Wado Ikemonji. "You asking permission?" Luffy grinned slightly. "No." "Good." Silence. Then Zoro said, "I'm not following you forever like this." Luffy looked at him then. Zoro's eye was steady. "I followed Luffy because he had a dream worth standing behind. If you're just wandering until something makes you laugh, that's not a captain. That's weather." Luffy's grin widened. "You gonna cut weather if it gets in my way." For a second, something electric passed between them, not hatred, not yet, maybe one day. Luffy laughed softly. "There he is." Zoro frowned. "What?" "Nothing." The others arrived slowly, Nami first, then Robin, then Sanji, Chopper, Usopp, Frankie, Brook, Jinb. They stood together on the shore of the final island, not behind Luffy, not exactly beside him, but with space. That space was new, it mattered. Luffy looked at them. No one spoke for a while. Then Chopper stepped forward, crying openly. "Are you really going?" Luffy scratched his head. "Think so." "Why?" He looked at the horizon. "Because there's more map." Nami laughed once through tears. "That is the most Luffy answer you've given in weeks." He looked at her. For half a second, his face shifted, the grin softened, his eyes cleared. The sun hit him just right. And there he was, not fully, not permanently, but enough. Monkey D. Luffy looked at his crew, the boy from Fuchsia Village. The captain of the Straw Hat Pirates, the idiot who punched gods because his friends were crying, the dreamer who wanted to be Pirate King because the freest person on the sea sounded like the most fun thing in the world. He smiled, small, real. "I had fun," he said. Nami covered her mouth. Chopper sobbed. Sanji's face broke before he turned away. Usopp whispered, "Luffy." The moment lasted half a breath, then it passed. Lobo's grin returned, but quieter now, not kind, never that, but less empty. "Don't get weird," he said. Nami punched him in the chest. He barely moved. Too late. She said. He looked down at where she hit him, then at her, then laughed. And for once, the laugh did not sound completely wrong. He boarded the goat alone. No one stopped him. Frankie did not offer repairs. Nami did not give him a route. Sanji did not pack food, though later everyone would notice a bag of meat had somehow appeared near the mast. Chopper did not chase him, though he left bandages by the dock where Luffy would see them. Robin said nothing, but she held the history of the world in her hands and knew he had given it to her by not caring enough to keep it. Zoro watched from the shore. Brook played one note on his violin, just one. Jin bowed his head. Usopp raised a shaking hand. "Hey," he shouted. "If you die out there, I'll tell everyone I beat you." Luffy looked back from the deck. "Good lie." Usopp cried harder. The sail dropped. The regrettable goat pulled away from Laugh Tale. It moved toward the edge of the known map, toward seas not yet named, toward storms without politics, monsters without titles, and jokes no historian would ever properly record. The Straw Hat Pirates watched their captain leave, or the thing that had been their captain, or both. The distinction hurt too much to settle. On the railing, Luffy paused. The island shrank behind him. The crew stood together on the shore, small against the ruins and the sea and the enormous burden of what came next. He looked back at them. For one moment, half a second, the length of a breath, something in his face looked like Luffy again. Then he turned around. The ship got smaller. The horizon took him. The world would spend the next 100 years arguing about what he was. Some called him demon, some called him god. Some called him liberator, butcher, pirate, disaster, punchline, devil, saint, mistake. The Marines built entire doctrines around surviving him. The revolution used the opening he created to rebuild nations. Former slaves told stories of the day the gods fell, and the sky did nothing to stop it. Children in ports wore cheap straw hats and shouted that thrones were stupid. Historians fought over whether Mary Geoise had fallen by accident, destiny, or the world's strangest act of political commentary. The straw hats told fewer stories than people wanted. Robin told the truth that mattered. Nami drew new maps. Sanji found seas touching in ways they had not before. Zoro kept training. One eye always turned toward horizons where bad weather might someday need cutting. Usopp became braver each time he admitted he had been afraid. Chopper kept curing wounds the old world had called natural. Frankie went back for the Sunny. He found her damaged, lonely, still floating. He cried into her railing for an hour and threatened to deny it forever. Brook wrote a song he only played on quiet nights. Jin helped steer a world that had forgotten how to move without chains. And somewhere beyond every official route, on a stolen ship that should not have survived one storm, a man in a straw hat laughed at the edge of the map. He was not the hero the world deserved. He was not the villain it understood. He was the end of one story and the beginning of nothing in particular. And somewhere in the vast and lawless sea, for reasons no one could explain and no god could survive, the adventure was finally, genuinely, irreversibly fun.